Chapter 1. The Knock. Nobody answered January in New York is not weather. It is a policy. It tells you what you may hope for and what you will not get, and it enforces the rules with wind that feels personal. That night, the one that started it, the wind came down West 35th Street like it had read the map and disliked us. I was at my desk in the office, doing what Wolfe calls maintenance, and I call penance. The mail had been sorted, the accounts checked, and the phone had the decency to be silent. Fritz had brought coffee that tasted like it had been made by a man who respects civilization, and I had lit a cigarette and decided to tolerate the world. Wolfe was upstairs, of course. With the orchids, he had spent 2 hours in the plant rooms, that evening adjusting valves and muttering at blossoms as if they had opinions. When he came down after 9, he had the satisfied look of a man who has restored order to a small kingdom and is prepared to scold the larger one. He was in his chair behind the desk, enormous and composed, when the doorbell rang. If the doorbell rings after 9 at the brownstone, it is either calamity or stupidity. Calamity is more common. I went to the door and opened it, and found a young woman on the stoop in a coat that was too thin for the night, and a face that looked as if it had been kept awake by guilt. She was not crying. Crying is sometimes easy, she had passed that. She was shaking, but she was standing, which told me she had made a decision. You picked a bitter one. Her lips moved, and a sound came out that was supposed to be her name but got tangled on the way. She swallowed and tried again. Lena Pierce. I stepped aside. Come in before the street takes you apart. She entered, and the warmth hit her like a surprise. She stood in the hall for a second, holding her handbag to her ribs, as if she expected someone to reach in and remove her courage. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her eyes were clear, and that clarity looked expensive. "What brings you to this address at this hour?" I asked, because it was better than asking why she looked like she had been chased. "I need to see Nero Wolfe," she said. Her voice steadied a little as she spoke his name, as if names were solid. "Most people do," I told her. "Some of them do not get what they want. Wait here." I led her into the office. The lamps were on, the curtains drawn, and the room looked as it always does, orderly enough to make a disordered mind feel accused. The red leather chair sat waiting like an invitation and a warning. I said, "Sit." She sat on the edge of it, which is common among the guilty and the frightened. I went to the stairs and called up, "Wolfe, visitor." His voice came down thick with annoyance. "At this hour?" "A young woman," I called back, shaking with guilt, "not carrying a pizza." A pause, then, "Bring her in." "I already did," I said, and went back to the office. Wolfe entered a minute later, in his yellow silk pajamas and his black slippers, looking like an emperor who had been interrupted in the middle of correcting the universe. His eyes went to Lena Pierce, and for an instant the annoyance vanished, replaced by that cold, steady interest he reserves for puzzles that might be worth his time. He sat, arranged his hands, and spoke. "Miss Pierce, you are distressed." "Yes," she said, and her voice trembled, just enough to irritate her. Wolfe's tone was mild. "Distress is not actionable, state the cause." She took a breath. I did not answer my door. That was not what I expected. I had been prepared for a missing husband, a blackmail note, or a complaint about a neighbor with noisy shoes. Not a door. Wolfe's brows lifted slightly. "You did not answer your door." "2 nights ago," she said quickly, "at 9:40. Someone knocked on my apartment door." "And you did not answer," Wolfe said, still mild, as if we were discussing etiquette. She shook her head. "I thought it was a neighbor, or someone on the wrong floor. I live in a building where people knock on the wrong door. It happens." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And yet you have come here, implying that this knock was consequential." She swallowed. "It was by morning my co-worker was dead. That got more attention." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Mine did too." "Name?" Wolfe said. "Evan Marr," she replied. "He was found dead in the stairwell 1 floor below my apartment." Wolfe did not move, but the room seemed to lean forward. "Cause," she shook her head, eyes wide, I do not know. The police said it looked like he fell, but they asked questions. They asked about the knock. Wolfe's gaze flicked to me. Mr. Goodwin, telephone Inspector Kramer. I can save you the nickel, a voice said from the hall. The front door had opened. Heavy steps came in. Inspector Kramer appeared in the office doorway, hat in hand, coat collar up, face red from the cold and from irritation. He looked at Lena Pierce and grunted. She came, he said. Lena's shoulders tightened. Inspector. Kramer looked at Wolfe. I told her to come. She's not a suspect. She's a witness with nerves. Wolfe's voice was calm. Then why are you here? Kramer snorted. Because you make my life harder. I got a dead man in a stairwell, and a missing envelope and a witness who waited behind a locked door. It smells like something you'll enjoy. Wolfe's eyes narrowed at the word enjoy, but he did not deny it. Proceed facts. Kramer stepped in, took the chair opposite my desk without being invited, and said, 2 nights ago. Wednesday, Evan Marr leaves his office building around 8:30. He's carrying an envelope marked payroll urgent. We got that from a co-worker who saw it. By 10:30 he's dead in the stairwell of Lena Pierce's apartment building. 1 floor below her place. Body found at 7:15 in the morning by a tenant going to work. No wallet missing, no watch missing. The envelope is missing. That is the interesting part. Wolfe's gaze fixed on Lena. Miss Pierce heard a knock at 9:40. Lena nodded, eyes shining. Yes, I heard it. 3 knocks, not loud, not soft, firm. Wolfe's voice was quiet. And you did nothing. Her mouth twisted. I froze, I thought. If I do not answer, whoever it is will go away. I thought it was safer. Wolfe's eyes were cold. Safer is not always safer. It is sometimes merely later. Kramer grunted. She waited. Nobody came again. She didn't call anyone. She went to bed. Next morning, the cops are banging on her door asking if she heard anything. I said, did she tell you about the knock right away? Kramer's face tightened. After some pushing, she admitted it. She felt guilty. She should. Lena flinched. I do. That is why I am here. Wolfe's voice was dry. Guilt is a poor guide, but it can lead one to a useful address, Miss Pierce. Why did you not answer? She swallowed. Because I was alone. Because it was late. Because there have been break-ins in the building. Because my mother always told me not to open the door at night. Wolfe's eyelids lowered slightly. And because you were afraid. Yes, she whispered. Wolfe nodded once. Fear is common. Criminals rely on it. Kramer leaned forward. The building super says the stairwell door on her floor sticks. You have to pull hard. Evan's body was 1 floor below, near the landing. He had bruising on his head. Could be a fall, could be a push. Medical examiner says, maybe blunt force, maybe impact from steps. No clear weapon found. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. The envelope. Kramer nodded. Missing. That's motive. Payroll is money. Or at least paper that leads to money. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Or it leads to something else hidden inside an envelope, labeled payroll. People label things to discourage curiosity, I said. Who was Evan Marr? Kramer shrugged. Payroll clerk at Meriton Accounts assigned to the Kessler and Dunn Services account. Not a flashy place. He lived in Queens and handled payroll processing for clients like Kessler and Dunn Services. No known enemies, no record. He was on his way, apparently, to deliver that envelope somewhere. We don't know where. Wolfe's eyes stayed on Lena. Miss Pierce, how did you know Mr. Marr? We worked in the same office, she said quickly. He was payroll. I am an operations assistant assigned to support finance. Corrections, routing, schedules. I see people, I schedule. I do not handle money. Wolfe's tone was precise. Did you speak with him that day? She nodded. Yes, he was nervous. Nervous how? Wolfe asked. He kept checking the envelope, she said. He said he had to get it to someone. He said it could not wait. Kramer said, she told us that. We also found out he left the building with the envelope at 8:30. 5 after that, nothing until his body. Wolfe looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, your impression. I shrugged. If a man is carrying an envelope, marked payroll, urgent and ends up dead in a stairwell, the envelope was the prize. The knock was either an attempt to get him inside Lena's apartment, or to get Lena to open up, so someone could see if she was alone, or to confirm whether she heard anything. Wolfe nodded slowly. Courtesy denied is information. People knock for a reason, and killers count on fear. Lena's eyes widened at that line, and her guilt deepened, because it gave her hesitation a shape. Kramer snorted. You and your sayings. The simple thing is, Evan goes into the building, someone meets him in the stairwell, wants the envelope. There's a struggle, he falls. Envelope goes missing. Lena is just a tenant who heard a knock and stayed quiet. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. If it were so simple, you would not be here. Kramer's mouth tightened. I'm here because the missing envelope is trouble. Payroll trouble. Company trouble. And because someone managed to pull it off in a building with locks and tenants, and I want to know who. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Then provide more facts. How did Mr. Marr enter the building? Kramer said, front door has a lock. Tenants have keys. Visitors ring. Security camera in lobby. It shows Evan entering at 9:32. He is alone. He looks over his shoulder once, then heads to the stairwell instead of the elevator. I said. Instead of the elevator. Kramer nodded. Yeah. Elevator was working. Why take stairs unless he was nervous and wanted to avoid the lobby desk? Or he expected someone in the stairwell? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Or he intended to go to a particular floor quickly and quietly. Kramer continued. Camera coverage is bad. Lobby only. No cameras in stairwell. Building management says tenants complained about privacy, so they did not install more. We got the usual story. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Privacy is often purchased at the cost of safety. Lena said. I did not know he was there. Wolfe looked at her. Did you know he knew where you lived? She hesitated. He may have. People talk. He once mentioned he lived near my neighborhood, but I never invited him. Kramer said. He had a note in his pocket with an address. Her building address. No apartment number. Lena's face drained. He had my address. Wolfe's eyes were calm. He came to your building. That is now fact. The knock at 9:40 may have been his attempt to reach you, or someone else's attempt to reach him through you. I said, do you have the note? Kramer pulled it from his pocket in an evidence sleeve. It was a torn scrap with the building address written in neat block letters. No apartment number. Wolfe looked at it and said, he did not know your apartment number, or he did not wish to write it. Lena whispered, why would he come? Wolfe's eyes returned to her. Did you have any connection to payroll? She shook her head quickly. Number none. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Do not answer too quickly. Connections are often indirect. Did you ever ask him for a favor, request an advance, discuss wages, mention an error? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. There was an error last month. My overtime was short. I spoke to Evan. He fixed it. He said it was a system mistake. Wolfe nodded. So you had reason to speak, not reason to meet at night with an urgent envelope. Kramer leaned forward. We asked at the office. They say Evan had been fighting with someone in management about payroll discrepancies, missing hours, extra hours. A contractor list that did not match the timesheets he was pushing. They told him to drop it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, and he did not. Kramer shook his head. Apparently not. He stayed late Wednesday. He printed something. He sealed it. He wrote payroll, urgent on it, like it was official. Then he left. I said official, or intended to look official. Kramer nodded grudgingly. Yeah. Wolfe sat silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears. When Wolfe is silent like that, you do not interrupt, unless you want to be flattened. Finally Wolfe spoke. Miss Pierce, when you heard the knock, did you hear anything else? She frowned, concentrating. Footsteps. Someone shifting weight, a small sound, like paper brushing against the door. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. A small sound. Yes, she said. I thought it was a flyer being slipped, but nothing was there when I checked in the morning. Kramer said. She checked after she heard about the body. Nothing. Wolfe nodded slowly. So the knock was accompanied by paper, an envelope perhaps, or a note, or a signal, I said. Did you look through the peephole? Lena's cheeks reddened. Number, I was afraid. Wolfe's voice was dry. Fear encourages imagination, not observations. She flinched, but she did not argue. Kramer said, We checked the stairwell. There's a scuff on the wall 1 floor below her, near where the body was. There's a smear on the handrail, but it could be from anyone, not much else. Whoever did it was careful or lucky. Wolfe's gaze moved to Kramer. List the people who benefit from the missing envelope. Kramer snorted. Everyone who was cooking the payroll. Wolfe's tone stayed calm. Name. Kramer grimaced. Company owner, Kessler. Payroll supervisor, a woman named Doris Venn. Operations manager, Gerald Pike, and a contractor coordinator, Matteo Silk. Those are the names that show up in the internal emails. We pulled some messages after we got a warrant. Evan was complaining to them. They were telling him to stop stirring the pot. Wolfe nodded. And Miss Pierce works in operations. Lena stiffened. As an assistant, I do not approve anything. Wolfe's eyes were cold. Assistants hear things. Assistants in the finance chain hear more. Assistants are useful, I said. So Evan Marr comes to her building with an envelope, no apartment number, and ends up dead in the stairwell. That suggests he was meeting someone. Not necessarily Lena. Wolfe nodded. Or he intended to use Miss Pierce as an entry point. A door is a tool. A closed door is also a tool. Lena whispered. He knocked. I did not answer. Wolfe's tone was precise. And that changed the sequence. That is why you are here. You delayed, and someone benefited. Kramer muttered. Or he just got killed anyway. Wolfe looked at him. Inspector, do not underestimate the influence of small decisions. A hesitation can redirect a crime. Kramer's jaw tightened. All right, you taking it or not. A killer who knocks may return. Her eyes widened. Return. Wolfe nodded. If the envelope was intended for you, you may be threatened. If it was intended for someone else, you are still a witness who has now spoken. That is also dangerous. Kramer grunted. I can post a patrol. Wolfe's gaze stayed on Kramer. Do so, and provide me with the company's payroll discrepancy records, the internal emails, and a list of all persons with access to payroll printing and sealing supplies. Kramer scowled. You want their stationery? I want their habits. Wolfe replied. A sealed envelope requires preparation. Preparation leaves traces. Kramer stood, irritated. Fine, I'll send what we got. Wolfe turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, you will visit the building. You will examine the stairwell. You will speak to tenants. You will learn whether anyone else heard the knock, saw a stranger, or noticed an envelope. I said, Yes, sir. I will do the walking while you do the thinking, and Theodore does the cooking. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Theodore does not cook. Fritz does. Do not be careless with names. Careless with names is how you end up dead in a stairwell, I said. Wolfe ignored that. He looked back to Lena Pierce. Miss Pierce, you will remain available. You will not return home alone tonight. Mr. Goodwin will arrange your transport. You will answer your telephone if it rings. She swallowed. Yes. Wolfe leaned back slightly, and his voice became the calm finality that means he has decided. I accept this case. The missing envelope is motive, but the closed door is mechanism. We will determine what you delayed, Miss Pierce, and who benefited from your fear. Lena's eyes filled, and she nodded, because there was nothing else to do. I went to fetch my coat, and as I did, I glanced once at Wolfe in his chair, enormous and still, already assembling the case like a man arranging a meal course by course. The orchids upstairs would be tended at dawn, the kitchen would produce dinner on schedule, and the city outside would keep freezing and hurrying and pretending it was safe behind locked doors. But somewhere in that city someone had counted on a knock being unanswered. And Wolfe, who hates nothing more than being manipulated by a timetable he did not choose, had just agreed to measure the cost of that closed door. Chapter 2, Courtesy and its absence. The next morning New York was still freezing, which was no surprise, but it had stopped pretending it might warm up if you behaved. The wind had a clean, hard edge, and the sidewalks had that bright, hostile look that makes you walk as if you have a grievance with gravity. At the brownstone, warmth and order waited like a bribe. Fritz was in the kitchen doing what he does best, which is proving that a man can be quiet and still accomplish miracles. The smell of coffee and something buttery came down the hall, and if I had been a sensible citizen, I would have stayed in the house and let other people solve their own murders. Wolfe was in the office behind his desk, already dressed, already fed, already annoyed with the world for existing outside his schedule. He had been upstairs with the orchids at dawn, because the orchids do not respect homicide, and he returned from the plant rooms with that calm satisfaction he gets when something living has done what it was told. I brought him the initial notes from Kramer, the ones that had arrived overnight, and sat at my desk. Wolfe glanced at the papers, then at me. "You will go to Miss Pierce's building," he said. "You will talk to tenants. You will learn whether courtesy was denied by one person only, or by many." I said, "You want a survey of fear." "I want the pattern," Wolfe replied. "Fear is common. Patterns are useful." "Sure," I said. "I will go interview the polite and cautious." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "Also, you will determine whether the knock was familiar." "Because friendly knocks are rare in murder," I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Killers do not usually knock in friendly patterns unless they expect to be welcomed." I got my coat, took my notebook, and went out into the January policy. Lena Pierce's building, Ridgeway Tower, was on the Upper West Side, the kind of mid-rise that tries to look respectable by painting the lobby and keeping the mail slots shiny. It had a locked front door, an intercom that worked half the time, and a doorman who sat behind glass and looked as if his primary duty was to disapprove of strangers. I showed my identification, used Wolfe's name as a key, and was sent upstairs to Lena's floor. Kramer had posted a patrol car outside overnight, which made tenants both safer and more curious. Curiosity is always the side effect of police. The hallway outside Lena's apartment was quiet. The carpet was worn. The walls had the faint smell of old cooking, the kind of place where people live close enough to hear each other's arguments, but far enough apart to pretend they do not. Lena had told me she heard the knock at 9:40 p.m. 2 nights ago and did not answer. Evan Marr was found dead in the stairwell 1 floor below her. That meant the hallway, the door, and the stairwell were the stage. Now I needed the audience. I started with the neighbor across the hall, because across the hall neighbors hear everything and pretend they do not. A woman in her 60s answered after a cautious pause. She kept the chain on, which was sensible. "Yes," she said, peering through the crack. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "I work for Nero Wolfe. I'm investigating Evan Marr's death." Her eyes widened slightly. People who live in New York know that if Nero Wolfe's name is involved, something is either serious or spectacular. She unhooked the chain and opened the door. "Come in. I don't want to talk in the hallway." Her apartment smelled like tea and worry. She led me to a small living room with too many doilies and a television that looked unused. "My name is Mrs. Halberd," she said, as if the name might help. "What do you want to know?" "2 nights ago," I said, "around 9:40, did you hear a knock on Lena Pierce's door?" Her mouth tightened. "Yes," I nodded. "Describe it." She frowned, thinking. "It was firm, not a pounding, not drunk. It sounded like someone trying to be polite." "Did you hear anyone speak?" I asked. "No," she said. "Just the knock." "Did you hear footsteps afterward?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, That is what bothered me. The footsteps retreated slowly, not hurried, like whoever it was waited a second, listening, then walked away at an ordinary pace. That was a detail with weight. A man who knocks and does not get an answer usually leaves quickly if he is innocent and nervous, or quickly if he is guilty and nervous. Leaving slowly suggests either confidence or deliberate performance. "Did you look through your peephole?" I asked. Mrs. Halbert gave me a look, as if I had suggested she should dance in the hallway. "At night, people around here are polite, but cautious after dark." "Because," I said, "you have had trouble." She nodded. "There have been break-ins, not lately, but enough that we do not open doors without knowing who is there." "Did you hear the person go down the stairs?" I asked. She hesitated. "I heard the stairwell door open a minute later, I think. That heavy door squeaks, then nothing." I wrote it down. "Thank you, Mrs. Halbert." "One more question. Have you ever heard a knock like that before? That rhythm." Her eyes narrowed. "Rhythm. Like someone has a way of knocking," I said. "A pattern." She shook her head. "Number a knock is a knock." That was honest. Some people hear patterns everywhere, and some people hear none. Mrs. Halbert sounded like a woman who keeps her attention for things that matter, like rent and neighbors who borrow sugar and never return it. I thanked her and went down the hall to the next apartment. Then the next. Most people were polite, cautious, and not much use. They had heard nothing, or heard a thump, or heard something, and decided not to listen. That last one is New York's contribution to criminal enterprise. People do not like getting involved. It is expensive. On the end of the hall, a young man in sweatpants opened his door and said, "Yeah, I heard a knock. Everybody hears knocks. I got headphones." That was not helpful. In the apartment, 2 doors down from Lena's, a woman named Nadine Voss admitted she heard something. "I heard the knock," she said. "Then I heard someone stand there. Not long, then footsteps." "Fast?" I asked. "No," she said, frowning. "Not fast." That's what was odd. Slow. Like they expected her to open. Like they were giving her time to decide. That matched Mrs. Halbert. 2 witnesses to slow retreat suggested it was not imagined. It was a choice. "How long after the knock did the footsteps leave?" I asked. Nadine shrugged. "Maybe 20 seconds, maybe 30. That was enough time for a person behind the door to debate fear, and enough time for a person outside the door to savor the debate." I went down 1 flight of stairs and stood on the landing where Evan Marr had been found. The stairwell was narrow, concrete walls painted a tired beige, metal handrail, cold enough to sting. The building's idea of lighting was a bulb that looked as if it had been installed during the last ice age. I walked down and up, watching the angles. The landing offered a blind spot from the hallway. A man could wait there, unseen by anyone looking down from above. A man could also be dragged there. The floor had been scrubbed, which is what buildings do after death. They scrub because it feels like cleaning the conscience. On the wall near the landing, there was a faint scuff mark. As Kramer had said, it looked like a shoe had scraped. On the handrail there was a smear that might have been anything. The air smelled faintly of bleach. If Evan Marr had been lured into the stairwell, the lure could have been a knock at Lena's door. The refusal to answer could have kept him in the hallway too long, or forced him to move, or forced him down the stairs. Wolfe had said it would redirect him. Now I could see the redirect. The stairwell was a funnel. I returned to Lena's apartment and found her sitting in her small kitchen with a cup of tea untouched. Kramer had assigned a uniformed man outside her door, and Lena looked like she wanted to apologize to him for existing. She looked up when I entered. "Mr. Goodwin." I sat at the small table across from her. "Lena, I talked to your neighbors. They say the footsteps retreated slowly after the knock, not hurried, like whoever it was waited for a decision." She swallowed. "I did not decide fast." "No," I said. "You did not. That is why you feel like the villain. You are not, but you are involved." She nodded, eyes tight. "I keep hearing it." "Tell me about the knock," I said. "You said you recognized the rhythm." Her cheeks reddened. "Yes." "Describe it," I said. She took a breath. 3 taps. Pause 2 taps. I wrote it down. 3 pause 2. It sounded familiar, she said quietly, almost friendly. Friendly to whom? I asked. She hesitated. To someone who knows you, like a friend who does not want to startle you, like someone saying, "It's me, open up." That is important, I said. Who knocks like that in your life? She shook her head. I do not know. That's what frightens me. I leaned forward. Lena, do not say you do not know when what you mean is you are afraid to name someone. Name the people who might knock on your door at night. Her eyes flicked down. No one should. That is not an answer, I said. She swallowed. My sister, if she was in trouble, a neighbor, maybe a friend from work, but that would be strange. A friend from work, I said. Evan Marr. Her eyes widened. Evan, number he would not. We were not that close. Did he know where you lived? I asked. She nodded reluctantly. He knew the building. He did not know the apartment number. At least, I do not think he did. Could he have gotten it? I asked. She hesitated. Maybe from the office directory. Some people list addresses for payroll. I nodded. Payroll again. It was always payroll when people wanted to be discreet and dangerous. Payroll holds addresses, bank accounts, social security numbers, the private bones of employees. Lena, I said, when you heard the knock, did it occur to you that it might be Evan? She stared at her hands. After, not then. Then I was only afraid. And if it was Evan, I said, and you did not answer, he might have waited, then moved. Her voice was small. I did not want to open the door, I thought. If I do not, he will go away. Simone went away, I said. But Evan did not. She flinched. I stood. I need to go to Evan's office. She looked up, hope flickering. Will it help? It will, I said, because it had to. Meriton Accounts, where Evan Marr worked, was in Midtown in a building that smelled like elevators and tired ambition. It was not the kind of place that inspires grand crimes. It inspires small ones, the kind that sit inside spreadsheets and eat slowly. At the reception desk, a woman with a careful smile asked who I was. I gave her my name and Wolfe's name, and the smile became less careful and more alarmed. She made a call. After a few minutes, a man in shirt sleeves arrived, introduced himself as Cal Mercer, and led me to a small conference room. Mercer looked as if he had not slept. That was common after death, especially when the death is nearby. "You're from Nero Wolfe," Mercer said. "Yes," I said. "I want to talk about Evan Marr." Mercer exhaled. "Evan was a good man." "Good men get killed," I said. "I'm trying to understand why." Mercer nodded, tired. "Ask Evan was helping cover payroll during the post." "Holiday rush," I said. Mercer nodded. "Yes. 2 people were out sick, and Evan picked up extra work." "Did he mention anything unusual?" I asked. Mercer hesitated. "He mentioned that email was too risky." I leaned forward. "He said that?" "Yes." Mercer said, "He told me Wednesday afternoon. He said, 'I'm going to deliver something in person tonight. Email is too risky.'" I joked that he was acting like he had state secrets. He didn't laugh. "What was he delivering?" I asked. Mercer shook his head. "He didn't tell me. He said it was payroll related. He said there were discrepancies. He said someone was padding contractor hours. He was upset." "Who was he delivering it to?" I asked. Mercer frowned. "He didn't say a name. He just said he had to deliver it in person." I nodded. "Did he mention Lena Pierce?" Mercer's eyes shifted. "Lena, the assistant?" "Yes," I said. "Did he mention her?" Mercer hesitated. "Not directly. But he asked me once if we had addresses on file for operations staff. I told him payroll had them. He said, 'Right.' That was it." "Did he ever talk to Lena?" I asked. Mercer shrugged. "They spoke sometimes. She's one of those people who knows where everyone is supposed to be. Evan asked her questions about overtime coding. That's normal. Did anyone else in this office have reason to want Evan's envelope?" I asked. Mercer's mouth tightened. Management. Names, I said. He swallowed. Doris Venn, payroll supervisor. Gerald Pike, operations manager at the client company. Matteo Silk, contractor coordinator. And a man named Ross Kessler, owner of Kessler and Dunn Services. Evan was doing payroll for their account. He was furious about their contractor hours. He said he had proof. Proof in an envelope marked payroll urgent, I said. Mercer nodded grim. Yes, Evan printed it. He sealed it himself. He wrote on it, I saw it. What was his route? I asked. Where did he go after leaving here? Mercer shrugged helplessly. We assumed home. Now we know he went to that building. I sat back. The puzzle pieces were aligning in Wolfe's favorite way, which is to say, in an ugly, logical way, Evan had an envelope. Evan believed email was too risky. Evan chose to deliver something in person. Evan went to Lena's building with the building address written down. No apartment number. Evan knocked at Lena's door in a familiar pattern, or a pattern Lena interpreted as familiar, and was dead in the stairwell minutes later. The envelope was missing. That meant Evan's delivery was not random. It was directed, and since he was at Lena's building, the route ended at her door, or would have ended there if the door had opened. I thanked Mercer and left, and on the way out I paused at Evan's desk area. His chair sat empty. A photograph of a dog was taped to the monitor. A small box of paper clips sat neatly aligned. Payroll men are often tidy. They need to be. Their work is other people's trust. I returned to the brownstone by late afternoon, with January darkening early like a man shutting blinds. When I entered, warmth and the smell of dinner met me in the hall. Fritz nodded, took my coat, and asked, as if homicide were a normal part of the menu, "Mr. Goodwin, will you dine with Mr. Wolfe?" "Yes," I said. "If the case does not kill my appetite first." Fritz gave a small, polite look that suggested my appetite was my own problem, and went back to his kingdom. Wolfe was in the office, as expected, with a book open that he was not reading. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes sharpened slightly, which meant he had been waiting. "Report," he said. I sat at my desk and gave it to him straight. Tenants are polite, but cautious. Two neighbors heard the knock and the footsteps, retreating slowly, not hurried, like someone waiting for a decision. Lena insists the knock rhythm was 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, familiar and almost friendly. No one saw the knocker. Stairwell is a funnel, good blind spot, 1 floor below Lena. Wolfe nodded once. And the office? Meriton, accounts, I said. Evan was covering payroll in the post. Holiday Rush, a co-worker, Cal Mercer, says Evan told him he would deliver something in person that night because email was too risky. Evan printed and sealed an envelope marked payroll urgent. Mercer saw it. Evan was upset about discrepancies and contractor padding tied to a client company, Kessler and Dunn Services. Names involved: Doris Venn, Gerald Pike, Matteo Silk, Ross Kessler. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, and Evan's route. I let that land. Evan went to Lena's building with the building address written down. No apartment number. He knocked at her door at 9:40. He was dead in the stairwell shortly after. That means he was on a route that ended at Lena's door, or was meant to. Wolfe leaned back slightly, and his voice was quiet. So the door was not incidental? No, I said. It was the destination, or the gateway. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Kramer's timeline. I nodded. Kramer estimates death between 9:50 and 10:20. That places the knock just before Evan died. If he knocked at 9:40, waited, then moved, the stairwell encounter fits. Wolfe sat silent for a moment, and I could see the structure forming. The friendly knock pattern mattered because it suggested expectation. A killer who expects to be welcomed will knock like a friend, not like a burglar. If Evan was the knocker, he expected Lena to open. If someone else knocked, that person expected Lena to open or expected Evan to react. Either way, the knock was designed to produce a response. Wolfe's voice came at last, calm and certain. Evan Marr did not wander into that building. He went there with intent. He had something that could not travel by electronic means because it was too risky. He believed he could deliver it safely at Miss Pierce's door, and the door stayed closed, I said. Wolfe nodded, which redirected him. He looked at me. The door did not just refuse courtesy, it redirected a man into danger. I leaned back, thinking about that narrow stairwell and the slow retreating footsteps. So what now? Wolfe's eyes were steady. Now we learned to whom Evan intended to deliver the envelope. If it was Miss Pierce, we learn why. If it was someone else in that building, we learn why the building address was written without an apartment. We will examine payroll records, not merely for theft, but for motive, and we will determine who would knock in a friendly rhythm. I nodded. That means we go back to Meriton and to Kessler and Dunn. Yes, Wolfe said. And you will also determine whether Miss Pierce's fear was anticipated. A killer who counts on fear counts on behavior. That implies knowledge. I stood. All right, I'll go count behavior. Wolfe's eyes lifted toward the stairs for an instant. The direction of his orchids, the direction of a world he can control. Then he looked back at me, and his voice was quiet, firm. Courtesy denied is information, he said. We will learn what information the closed door provided to the man who waited for it. Outside, January tightened its grip on the city. Inside, Wolfe had already begun to pry open the space between a knock and a death, and I knew, with the unpleasant certainty I have learned to respect, that the missing envelope was not the only thing collected that night. Chapter 3. Someone waited in the hall. If you live in New York long enough, you learn that a hallway is not just a hallway. It is a border. It is a stage. It is a place where people decide whether they are brave, polite, careless, or dead. Lena Pierce's hallway had made its decision 2 nights earlier, and it had made it without consulting Lena. That morning, after Wolfe had issued his instructions with the calm authority of a man assigning chores to the universe, I went back to Lena's building to see what the building itself would admit. Wolfe had been upstairs with the orchids at dawn as usual, and came down smelling faintly of greenhouse air and satisfaction. Fritz had delivered breakfast that made it hard to believe anyone deserved misfortune, and Wolfe had ruined that belief promptly. The lobby camera, he said, before I had even sat down at my desk. I blinked at him. Good morning to you too. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Do not waste time. The lobby camera will show you whether Mr. Marr was followed, met or observed. You will also observe the elevator indicators. The building is a machine. Machines leave records. Yes, sir, I said, and if the machine lies, I will scold it. Wolfe did not smile. You will not scold. You will interpret, and you will remember that the closed door is not merely an absence of courtesy. It is a signal. That line followed me out into the winter. By the time I reached the building, my ears were numb, and my patience was thinner than my gloves. Security Supervisor Latham had not improved overnight. He met me in the lobby with the face of a man who believes every visitor is an accusation. We already gave the police the footage, he said. And the police gave it to a judge and a file, I told him. Wolfe prefers it given to his brain. You can cooperate voluntarily or involuntarily. Latham exhaled through his nose. Fine, come on. The lobby camera system was housed in a small office behind the front desk. It smelled of old coffee, warm electronics, and mild despair. A monitor showed the lobby from 2 angles, the front door and the corridor leading to the stairwell door. A third view caught the elevator bank and the indicator lights above the doors, small glowing numbers that tell you where the elevator thinks it is. I sat, leaned in, and watched the footage from the night Evan Marr died. At 9:32 p.m., Evan entered through the front door. The picture was grainy, but clear enough to show his posture and the way he held the envelope. It was slim, about the width of a legal document stack, and he carried it tight against his ribs like a man carrying something that could embarrass him. His shoulders were stiff. He looked over his right shoulder before stepping fully into the lobby. He was not panicked. He was wary. He walked past the mailboxes and toward the elevator, then veered, as Kramer had said, toward the stairwell door. He paused there, a fraction of a second, as if listening. Then he pulled the door open and went in. The door shut behind him. I noted the time, then rewound and watched again. Evan's glance over his shoulder mattered. It was the kind of glance men do when they feel watched, but do not want to confirm it. At 9:39, the lobby camera caught something else. A figure appeared near the stairwell door, not coming from outside, but from within the building, sliding into frame, as if he had been standing just out of view. He wore a hat with a brim that threw his face into shadow. The coat was dark. The posture was relaxed, not hurried, not aggressive. He did not approach the front door. He did not check the mailboxes. He did not press an elevator button. He stood near the stairwell door and watched the elevator indicator lights. That was the first moment in the footage that gave me that particular prickling in the back of my neck. An attacker in a hurry makes mistakes. A man who waits, watching small lights, makes plans. The figure did not attack anyone because no one was there to attack. He waited like a clerk waiting for a signature. At 9:40, the elevator indicator glowed as the car reached Lena's floor. That number held for a moment, then changed again. The elevator continued down. The figure near the stairwell door did not move until the elevator had stopped at Lena's floor, and then continued. Then he shifted, only slightly, like a man acknowledging that a message has been sent and received. I watched the sequence 3 times. The times matched Lena's statement and the neighbor's hearing of the knock. The elevator stopping at Lena's floor at 9:40 aligned too neatly to be coincidence. I sat back. "Show me the other angle," I told Latham. He clicked, and the view shifted to the elevator bank. The footage was worse, but the indicator lights were still visible, and the doors were clear enough to show when they opened. At 9:39, one elevator door opened. No one stepped out. The door closed. At 9:40, the elevator door opened again. Still no one stepped out. The door closed if a man rode the elevator to Lena's floor, knocked and returned. He could do it quickly. The elevator would carry him up. The hallway would conceal him from the lobby camera. The door's silence would tell him whether Lena was home and whether she would open. If she did not open, he would know he had a closed door. And a closed door can be used like a signal flare. I said, "Latham, does the elevator require a key to reach residential floors?" He shook his head. "Number only the basement storage." "So anyone can ride up?" I said. "Yes." I nodded. The building had offered a murderer convenience, the way New York offers hot dogs, cheap and everywhere. I stood. "I want to see the stairwell door latch." Latham frowned. "Why?" "Because doors have habits," I said. "And so do people." We went to the stairwell door. It was heavy, painted metal, with a latch mechanism that looked worn. I opened it. It made a small click, not loud. I closed it. It clacked, louder. I opened it again more carefully, controlling the pull and the close, and the click was almost silent. I tried it a third time. If you pulled it a certain way and eased the latch, you could make it behave. That meant a person who had practiced could slip in and out quietly, even in a building where tenants might listen for trouble. A planner would practice. I thanked Latham with the warmth he deserved, which was minimal, and went upstairs to speak to the superintendent. The super, a man named Rigo Sanz, lived in a small apartment on the ground floor. He answered the door with his face already set in defensive irritation. "I talked to the police," he said. "I talk better than the police," I told him, "and I am polite until I am not. Help me remain polite." That got me in. His apartment smelled of cooking oil and laundry. He sat at a small table, arms crossed. "What do you want?" "Stairwell door latch," I said. "Is it quiet?" He frowned. "It's loud. People slam it." "It can be quiet," I said, "if pulled a certain way." He stared at me. "Maybe, if you don't let it slam, who knows that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Me maintenance, people who live here a long time." "Any new faces?" I asked. "Any new tenants recently?" He shook his head. "Number any building workers?" I asked. "Cleaners, delivery, anyone with reason to be in the building at night?" Rigo shrugged again. There's a night cleaner twice a week. Not that night. There's a mail carrier earlier. Not that night. People come and go. Do you know Evan Marr? I asked. His eyes narrowed. The dead man. Number never saw him before. Did you see anyone in the lobby around 9:30 to 10? I asked. He shook his head. I was home. I don't watch the lobby like a guard. Security does, I said. And security missed a shadow with a hat. Rigo frowned. A hat. A man waiting, I said, watching elevator lights. Rigo's eyes widened slightly, then hardened again. People wear hats. Yes, I said. Some of them use hats to hide faces. Rigo shifted, uncomfortable. Are you saying someone planned it? I am saying someone waited, I said. That's planning. I left him and went upstairs again, this time to speak to Lena, because the knock rhythm detail had gained weight. A planned knock can be used like a password. If someone used a friendly pattern, it implied expectation of welcome. Lena answered her door immediately this time. She looked embarrassed by her speed, as if answering promptly were now a moral statement. You look tired, I told her. I didn't sleep, she said. Every sound makes me jump. I nodded. That's normal after a dead man is found in your building. She flinched. Do you think the knock was Evan? I don't know yet, I said. But I saw the lobby footage. Her eyes widened. You did? Yes, I said. Evan entered at 9:32 carrying the envelope. At 9:39 there was a figure near the stairwell door, face hidden by a hat. He didn't move much. He watched elevator lights. Lena swallowed. Summonen was watching. Yes, I said. And the elevator stopped at your floor at 9:40. Her hand went to her mouth. That's when I heard the knock. Yes, I said. The elevator then continued down. That suggests someone rode up, knocked, and returned. She stared at me, voice thin. So the knock was not random. No, I said. It was a test. She sat heavily on the edge of her couch, and I failed it. I shook my head. You didn't fail. You gave an answer, a closed-door answer. She looked up. What does that mean? It means someone learned something when you didn't open, I said. Either that you were home and afraid, or that you were not useful as a witness, or that you would not interfere. A closed door can tell a killer that the hallway is safe. Her eyes filled, so he used my silence as a signal. That's how it looks, I said. She whispered, I recognized the knock pattern. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Yes, I said. That pattern matters. It sounds like a familiar knock, friendly. She stared at the floor. I thought it might be someone I knew. That's why it felt worse, not better. Who uses that pattern? I asked. She shook her head, frustrated. I don't know. I keep trying to place it. It feels like a person who wants to seem harmless. That is useful, I said. A person who wants to seem harmless is often not harmless. I left her with the patrol officer still outside her door, and I went to find Kramer, because the footage raised one more question. Evan entered at 9:32. A figure appeared at 9:39. The elevator stopped at Lena's floor at 9:40. Evan's death window was estimated between 9:50 and 10:20. If the killer used the elevator to test Lena's door, then Evan was still alive after that test, which meant the test was not the murder itself. It was a signal that set something in motion. Kramer was at the precinct, grumpy and busy. He let me in because Wolfe's name still has that effect on him, like a wrench turning in the right direction. What? He demanded. I watched the lobby footage, I said. Evan entered at 9:32 with the envelope. At 9:39 a figure appears near the stairwell door, face hidden by a hat brim. He waits, watching elevator indicator lights. Elevator stops at Lena's floor at 9:40, matching the knock, then continues down. That suggests the killer rode the elevator, knocked, and used the closed door as a signal. Kramer's face tightened. We saw the figure. You didn't use him, I said. You filed him. Kramer scowled. We got 100 shadows a day. This shadow waited, I said. That's not 100 a day. Kramer grunted. All right, what else? Stairwell latch, I said. It can be quiet if pulled a certain way. A planner would know. Tenants wouldn't notice movement. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Planner, you and Wolfe love planners. Because planners kill clean, I said. Also, what about Evan's phone? Kramer's mouth hardened. Smashed. Smashed, I repeated. Not stolen. Right, Kramer said. Screen cracked, casing busted, inside components wrecked. Whoever did it didn't want it used, but they didn't take it. That's about timing, I said. Kramer stared. Timing. If Evan could call someone from the stairwell, he could change the sequence, I said. He could warn Lena. Call the police. Call his office. Smashed phone removes choices. It controls time. Kramer's jaw clenched. We thought it was rage. It could be rage, I said, but it's also function. Kramer snorted. Everything is function with Wolfe. Everything is function with criminals who plan, I said. He leaned back, rubbing his face. We got prints on the phone smeared. Not clean enough. No good match yet. You have the hat shadow, I said. Do you have him from outside footage? Kramer shook his head. The building only has lobby camera. Street cameras nearby are garbage. We got a partial on the sidewalk, but hats and collars in January make everyone look like a suspect. January is convenient that way, I said. Kramer grunted. Any other bright ideas? Evan came to deliver something in person because email was too risky, I said. That implies the envelope held evidence, payroll fraud, contractor padding, something that would ruin someone. The missing envelope is the prize, the knock is the mechanism, the smashed phone is timing control. Kramer's face tightened. And Lena's closed door is the signal. Yes, I said. Somebody knocked, waited for her decision, and used it. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You think the knocker was the killer? I think the knocker was part of the plan, I said. Maybe the killer, maybe a helper, maybe a messenger, but the elevator stop at Lena's floor matching her knock time is too clean to ignore. Kramer exhaled. All right, I'll send a man to pull more elevator logs. Do that, I said. If the elevator control panel has a maintenance log, it may show stops and calls. And if someone used a master key to call the elevator, that's a clue, Kramer nodded grudgingly. Fine. I left and went back to the brownstone, because Wolfe would want the footage story fresh, not cooled by my irritation. The brownstone greeted me with warmth and the smell of something serious happening in the kitchen. Fritz was setting the table as if the world were not full of stairwells. Wolfe was in the office, book open, eyes waiting. He did not ask me to sit. He did not need to. Report. I gave it to him in order because Wolfe likes order the way other men like comfort. Lobby camera shows Evan enter at 9:32 carrying a slim envelope, I said. At 9:39 a shadowy figure appears near the stairwell door, face hidden by a hat brim. He doesn't attack, he waits, watching the elevator indicator lights. Elevator stops at Lena's floor at 9:40 matching the knock, then continues down. That suggests someone rode the elevator, knocked, and used the door's silence as a signal. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. The patience. Yes, I said. Footsteps after the knock retreated slowly, witnesses say, not hurried. Wolfe nodded once. A person who waits after knocking is not impulsive. He is measuring. Also, I said, the stairwell door latch can be quiet if pulled a certain way. A planner would know. Tenants would not notice. Wolfe's gaze stayed steady, and Mr. Marr's telephone, I said. Kramer confirms it was smashed, not stolen, destroyed for timing control. Wolfe leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. His face looked calm, but I could see the satisfaction. Not pleasure in death, but pleasure in the structure of a plan being revealed. A man enters with an envelope, Wolfe said slowly. A second man waits, watching indicator lights. The elevator performs a brief visit to Miss Pierce's floor. At the precise minute she heard the knock. The door does not open. The waiting man receives his answer. Then Mr. Marr is dead in the stairwell below. He looked at me. The knock was not merely an attempt to gain entry. It was communication. Between who? I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. That is what we will determine. The person who knocked likely expected welcome. If he did not receive it, he signaled the plan to proceed elsewhere. The hallway became the alternate route, I said, which fits your idea that the closed door redirected Evan into danger. Wolfe nodded. Yes, fear delays action, and delay creates opportunity. He paused, then delivered the line with that quiet certainty that makes it stick. Our killer is an investor in hesitation, Wolfe said. I leaned back in my chair, looking at Wolfe's calm face and thinking about the figure in the lobby footage, standing near the stairwell door, watching little glowing numbers as if they were stock prices. An investor in hesitation. That meant we were not chasing a man who lost his temper on a stairwell. We were chasing a man who understood people, understood fear, and counted on it. Wolfe's voice continued, practical now. Tomorrow you will go to Meriton accounts again. You will examine Mr. Marr's work habits, his access, and his communications. You will learn who could have known he would be in Miss Pierce's building with that envelope. You will also find out who benefits from a payroll envelope disappearing without leaving an electronic trace. I nodded. And we find who knocks in a friendly pattern. Wolfe's eyes were steady. Yes, courtesy is a costume. We will discover who wore it. In the kitchen, Fritz's work continued, steady and civilized. Outside, New York kept freezing and hurrying, locking doors and hoping locks were enough. In Lena Pierce's hallway, someone had waited for a door to stay closed. And now, Nero Wolfe, who disliked fear but understood it, had decided to make that waiting expensive. Chapter 4. The envelope that pulled the trigger. A missing envelope is like a missing tooth. You keep running your tongue over the gap until you either find what took it or decide you can live without chewing. Wolfe does not live without chewing. He prefers his facts whole, and he prefers his motives exposed, even when they smell like old money. That morning, with the January cold trying to pry the city apart, I sat at my desk in Wolfe's office with a stack of paper that had been coaxed out of Meriton accounts by a mixture of charm, irritation, and the suggestion that Inspector Kramer might come in person. Wolfe was behind his desk, comfortable in the way only Wolfe can be comfortable, which is to say, as if comfort were a principle. Fritz had delivered coffee and a plate of something civilized, and Wolfe had eaten with the calm assurance of a man who believes murder should not interfere with digestion. Upstairs, the orchids were being tended by routine and by Wolfe's pride, as if beauty were a form of discipline. I told Wolfe, Meriton accounts coughed up some payroll adjustment printouts. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Coughing suggests reluctance. Reluctance is their natural state, I said. They like numbers, not attention. But Evan Marr left a trail, and trails are hard to erase when they are printed. Wolfe held out his hand without looking at it. I placed the papers there. He scanned them, his eyes moving with that slow, thorough precision that makes people wait and makes criminals sweat. January adjustments, he said at last, voice neutral. Yes, I replied. Post, holiday corrections, overtime coding, contractor invoices, and one line that is not a correction, it is a flag. Wolfe's gaze lifted. North Dock Services. I nodded. There it is, a refund line tied to North Dock Services. It sits among routine payroll adjustments like a rat in a bread basket. Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly. Explain. I leaned back and started in, because if you are going to explain a payroll irregularity to Nero Wolfe, you had better be accurate. His patience with math is higher than his patience with people, and that is saying something. Evan found a duplicate payment, I said. A contractor batch was paid twice. Same names, same hours, different routing code. One payment looks normal. The second payment is masked as a refund adjustment to North Dock Services. It is dressed up as a payroll correction, but it is money leaving under the label of cleaning up. Wolfe's eyes stayed on the page, and he printed proof. He did, I said. He printed the ledger trail, the batch summary, and the flagged line. He sealed it in an envelope, marked payroll urgent. Cal Mercer saw him do it. Wolfe sat back slightly. Why deliver it in person? Because email was too risky, I said. Evan said that out loud. That means he believed someone was monitoring electronic channels or could erase them. Wolfe's eyes narrowed again. A planner. That's our man, I said. An investor in hesitation. Wolfe's gaze did not soften. To whom did Mr. Marr intend to deliver it? That is the part that changed, I said. I spoke to Lena again. Wolfe's brows lifted. She has withheld information. She did not lie, I said. She delayed, but now she is doing what guilt sometimes forces people to do. She is becoming honest. Wolfe's voice was dry. Guilt is occasionally useful. I nodded and continued. Lena Pierce is not just an operations assistant, the way she told it to Kramer. In practice, she supports the finance supervisor, routing corrections, filing packets, moving paper. She handled early January corrections. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. So she had access. Not authority, I said, but access. She files, routes, submits, and sees what is corrected and what is disguised as correction. Wolfe's tone was quiet. Then Mr. Marr chose her because she could act quickly. That's what he believed, I said. He believed he could hand her the proof, and she could take it upstairs, figuratively speaking, to someone who would stop the fraud before it vanished. Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the paper, slow, deliberate, and the knock was designed to intercept that proof. Exactly, I said. If Evan reached Lena, he could hand it off. If someone reached Evan first, they could take it. The knock is the hinge. Wolfe leaned back. Continue, I said. I then went to see Lena's boss. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The finance supervisor. Yes, I said. Mason Klein. At that name, Wolfe's gaze became even more intent. Names are never just names to Wolfe. They are positions in a structure. Bring him here, Wolfe said. I did not bring him, I replied. I went to him. He did not want to come. Wolfe's mouth tightened, of course. Mason Klein's office was in a glass building that was proud of its elevators and ashamed of its humanity. He had the look of a man who lives in spreadsheets and believes paper cuts are personal attacks. When I introduced myself, he gave me a smile that had been practiced in front of a mirror for the purpose of discouraging questions. Mr. Goodwin, he said, as if my name were a minor inconvenience. I understand you work for Nero Wolfe. I do, I said. I also work for facts. Evan Marr died in a stairwell, and an envelope marked payroll urgent went missing. I'd like to know why he was carrying proof of a duplicate payment tied to North Dock services. His smile did not slip, but his eyes changed. It was a tiny movement, like a shutter closing. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. That's a popular phrase lately, I told him. It usually means the speaker knows exactly what I'm talking about. He gestured toward a chair, and I sat. He remained standing, which was a power habit. It did not work with me, but it might have worked on clerks. Meriton Accounts handles payroll support, he said. Evan Marr was a payroll clerk. If he discovered an error, he should have routed it through normal channels. He did not inform me of any visit. You're saying you didn't expect him, I said. I'm saying he never contacted me, Mason replied. That, I said, is not the same thing. His smile tightened. Mr. Goodwin, you're implying misconduct. I am implying homicide, I said. Misconduct is the appetizer. His mouth tightened. This is absurd. Then show me your calendar, I said. He blinked. My calendar. Yes, I said, because calendars tell the truth when people do not. His smile became thinner. You cannot demand my calendar. I can ask, I said. And I can also mention that Inspector Kramer can demand it. He hesitated, then shrugged as if granting me something he did not value. Fine, look. He opened his calendar app and angled the screen toward me. He scrolled through the day. Evan died. At 9:15 p.m., a private reminder appeared. One word, door. I looked at it, then looked at Mason Klein. His smile was now gone. It could mean take out the trash. It could mean check the lock. It could mean remember your umbrella. But you wrote it at 9:15 at night, and 2 nights ago at 9:40 there was a knock on Lena Pierce's door, and Evan Marr was dead by 10:20. I have trouble believing your one word is about trash." Mason's eyes narrowed. "You're making leaps." "I'm making bridges," I said, "between facts." He took the phone back and tapped quickly. "It's just a reminder I use, door," I repeated. "Do you often write that?" He hesitated. "Sometimes." "How often?" I asked. He stiffened. "Mr. Goodwin, this is not an interrogation." "It is if you want it to be," I said. "All you have to do is keep pretending you don't know anything." His jaw clenched. "I did not ask Evan Marr to come to anyone's apartment." "Did you ask him to deliver something?" I asked. "No," he said. "Did you know he was printing proof of a duplicate payment tied to North Dock Services?" I asked. "No," he said again. And this time, the word sounded rehearsed. I smiled slightly. "You're good at that word." He leaned forward, tone sharp. "Let me be clear, payroll systems are complicated. There are adjustments. There are corrections. There are vendor reconciliations. If you're trying to twist a payroll error into a crime, you're wasting everyone's time." I said, "A dead man is not a payroll error." He stared. "This is a tragedy." "Yes, but it is not my tragedy. Not yet," I said. I left him with that and returned to the brownstone with the calendar detail, burning a hole in my pocket. Now, in Wolfe's office, I repeated it. "Mason Klein claims he knows nothing about Evan's visit," I told Wolfe, "but his calendar shows a private reminder at 9:15 that night. One word, door." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "A man who writes, door expects an encounter." "Yes," I said, and he didn't look surprised to see it. He looked annoyed that I saw it. Wolfe sat silent for a moment, then spoke. "This is consistent with expectation. The question is, whose expectation Mr. Klein may have expected Mr. Marr, or he may have expected something else at a door, and the coincidence is exploited." "Either way," I said, "it's too neat to dismiss." Wolfe nodded once. Slowly, "What else?" "Kramer has another piece," I said. "Elevator logs." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Ah." Kramer had called while I was on my way back in the cheerful mood he adopts when he has something that makes a suspect uncomfortable. He had asked me to come by the precinct, but I had told him to bring it to Wolfe, because Wolfe likes his facts in his own chair. As if summoned by my mention, the doorbell rang. I went to the hall, opened the door, and there was Kramer, red-faced, coat collar up, carrying a folder like it had insulted him. "Cold enough for you," I said. "I don't come for the weather," he snapped, and stomped into the office. Wolfe looked at him. "Inspector." Kramer tossed the folder onto my desk, then glared at Wolfe. "You were right. Elevator's got a trick." Wolfe's tone was calm. "Explain." Kramer planted himself in the chair near the door, as usual, and spoke with the clipped satisfaction of a man delivering a blow. "Building maintenance found that the elevator can be put into technician mode," he said. "It's supposed to be for repairs. When it's activated, it can make a stop between floors and not log it the usual way. It hides the stop in the standard tenant record we found. It was activated briefly that night." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Briefly." "From 9:37 to 9:46, Kramer said. 9 minutes, someone had access. That means the elevator could have stopped between floors while the lobby indicator still showed movement." I leaned forward. "So our rider could have stepped off on a half floor and used the stairwell door without showing a clean stop?" Kramer nodded. "Exactly. It also means someone with maintenance access helped, or someone stole the code." Wolfe's gaze stayed steady, and the stop between floors aligns with the knock at 9:40. Kramer grunted. "Yes, and it aligns with the shadow near the stairwell door at 9:39. That shadow was watching the elevator lights. He may have been waiting for technician mode to do its job." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "So the building itself was manipulated." Kramer shrugged. "That's the part I hate. It's not just a guy with a weapon, it's a guy with a plan." Wolfe's tone was dry. "Plans are common. Competent plans are not, Kramer glared. You think he's competent? I think he anticipated resistance, Wolfe said. A man who anticipates resistance uses technician mode, a friendly knock pattern, and a silent stairwell latch. He expects a door to open. Kramer jabbed a finger at the papers on Wolfe's desk. And he expects that envelope. That's the motive. Wolfe looked at the North Dock line again. The envelope threatened to expose fraud. Therefore, the envelope must be intercepted. The knock was the intercept mechanism. When the door did not open, the killer adjusted, I said, quickly and violently. Wolfe nodded. Yes. Kramer leaned forward. So what now? You got your cute calendar word. You got a North Dock refund line. You got technician mode. You still don't have the missing envelope. Wolfe's eyes were steady. We have enough to identify who feared the envelope. Kramer snorted. Everybody fears payroll. Wolfe ignored that. He turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, you will return to Meriton accounts. You will obtain the exact documents that Mr. Marr printed. If they are missing from his workstation records, you will determine who accessed his print queue. You will also identify who knew Miss Pierce's building address and who could have arranged technician mode. I nodded. So we find who had elevator access. Yes, Wolfe said. And we find who wrote door. Kramer grunted. And I suppose you want Klein here. Wolfe's eyes did not move. Eventually, a man who expects an encounter at a door should explain why. Kramer stood, irritated. Fine, I'll haul him in when you're ready. Wolfe's voice was calm. You will do it when I am ready, which will be soon. Kramer glared, then left because arguing with Wolfe is like arguing with a wall. It does not change the wall, it only tires you. When the door closed, Wolfe sat back and regarded the papers again, as if he were reading a confession written in numbers and habits. The killer expected the door to open. Wolfe said quietly, because if the door opened, the envelope changes hands without struggle. Courtesy becomes the cover. When the door remained closed, the killer had to improvise. Improvisation produces violence. I exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. So Lena's fear forced the plan into the stairwell. Wolfe nodded. Yes, the closed door redirected Mr. Marr into danger. And technician mode let the killer move between floors without a clean record, I said. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Which implies access, or collusion. Someone in that building, or someone with maintenance codes, assisted. I frowned. A lot of people could know a maintenance code. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Not many would use it for homicide. He looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, the envelope did not merely contain proof. It pulled the trigger. It changed the matter from fraud to murder. I sat back, thinking about Evan Marr carrying paper that could not be emailed because it was too risky, and about a friendly knock pattern that was meant to make a door open without suspicion. Wolfe was right. The envelope had pulled the trigger, and the closed door had redirected the bullet. Wolfe's voice was steady. We will find the missing envelope. We will find who arranged the elevator. We will find who waited in the hall, and we will find the man who wrote door and believed that word would protect him. I nodded. And when we find him, we knock. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. We do not knock, Mr. Goodwin. We summon. That was Wolfe. He would never admit that sometimes the world begins with a simple knock. But he would admit, and he had admitted, that the wrong door staying closed can turn a quiet intercept into a death in a stairwell. And now someone who had expected a door to open was going to learn what it feels like when Wolfe refuses to be polite. Chapter 5. Wolfe measures the hesitation. Wolfe has a way of handling human fear that is almost unfair. He does not console it. He does not scold it, except in passing. He measures it. That afternoon, with the city outside still frozen, and the brownstone inside still warm enough to encourage illusions, Wolfe sat behind his desk as if he were conducting a small trial in which time itself was the witness. The lamps made the room look like an island of reason, and the smell drifting from Fritz's kitchen suggested the island might be well fed. Upstairs, the orchids were doing their quiet work of being perfect, which is Wolfe's favorite rebuke to mankind. I had brought back the elevator technician mode detail, the calendar word door, and the payroll printouts with the North Dock line that didn't belong. Kramer had been loud about it and then left, as usual, as if he could not stand being present when logic is doing the heavy lifting. Wolfe looked at me and said, "We will reconstruct 2 timelines." 2, I said. "We already have trouble with 1. We will have less trouble when we compare them," Wolfe replied. "One timeline is the one we have, the other is the one that did not occur. The difference is instructive." "That," I said, "is a Wolfe way of saying Lena should have opened the door." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "It is a Wolfe way of saying that her hesitation altered the criminal's options." I leaned back, lit a cigarette, and waited. When Wolfe starts building a structure, you either watch or you get flattened by the beams. Wolfe spoke calm and precise. Timeline 1, Miss Pierce opens her door at 9:40. The visitor stands there with an envelope and a polite demeanor. He claims to be delivering a payroll document. Miss Pierce, being an assistant to the finance supervisor and accustomed to receiving paper, accepts it or at least acknowledges it. The visitor retrieves or redirects the envelope, perhaps by claiming he must take it back for a signature or deliver it upstairs. He leaves. I said, "No murder." Wolfe nodded. "No murder." The envelope changes hands cleanly. Courtesy is the cover. A closed door is unnecessary. "And timeline 2, I said. "What we got?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. Timeline 2, Miss Pierce does not open. The visitor, expecting a door to open, does not receive his clean exit. He must retrieve the envelope from Mr. Marr directly. That requires confrontation. Confrontation requires isolation. Isolation is found in stairwells. I exhaled smoke. So Lena's closed door pushed him into violence. Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. It pushed him into risk. He then chose violence as the least risky alternative, which is an irony you should appreciate. I did appreciate it, but not enough to laugh. Wolfe leaned back slightly. "Now, Mr. Goodwin, we will refine the second timeline. You have the lobby footage, replay it. Observe Mr. Marr's behavior after 9:40, I said. "You think he did something visible?" "I think he hesitated," Wolfe replied. "And hesitation is a crack a murderer can use." That was a line worth writing down, but I didn't, because my notebook was already full of lines worth writing down. I went back to Lena's building because the footage system was there, and the case was not going to solve itself in Wolfe's chair, no matter how much Wolfe believed it ought to. Security supervisor Latham met me with the same sour expression. But he let me in because Kramer had left a clear instruction that I was to be tolerated. That is the kind of courtesy a police badge purchases. I sat at the monitor again and rewound to 9:38. At 9:39, the hat shadow appeared near the stairwell door. At 9:40, the elevator indicator showed the stop at Lena's floor. Evan at that moment was not visible because he was in the stairwell. But then, at 9:44, Evan reappeared. He emerged from the stairwell door into the lobby, moving carefully, not running. He held the envelope still, tight to his ribs. He paused just inside the lobby, near the stairwell door, and looked toward the elevator bank. He did not move toward the elevator immediately. He hesitated. It was small, a pause that might have been a man deciding whether to go up, go down, or go out. But in a planned murder, small pauses are cliffs. I leaned closer and watched his face. The angle was bad, but I could see his head tilt slightly, as if listening. Then he shifted his weight and stepped toward the elevator. That was when the shadow moved. The hat shadow, who had been near the stairwell door, stepped closer at the exact moment. Evan paused. It was not a rush. It was a glide, deliberate, practiced, like a man timing his movement to the beat of another man's uncertainty. Evan's head turned, as if he sensed presence. The footage did not show what happened next clearly, because the two men moved out of the camera's angle toward the corridor that led away from the lobby. But the timing was clear. Evan hesitated. The shadow stepped in. I sat back. That hesitation was fatal. It suggested Evan came back from the stairwell because something had failed upstairs. The knock. The closed door. He returned to the lobby uncertain, the killer, waiting, used that uncertainty to close the distance. Wolfe would like that. Not the death, but the mechanism. Wolfe always likes mechanisms because mechanisms can be dismantled. I called Wolfe from the lobby office because there are some things you do not wait to report, and a fatal hesitation is one of them. He answered with his usual calm. Yes. I replayed the footage, I said. After the elevator stop at 9:40, Evan comes back out of the stairwell at 9:44. He pauses just inside the lobby, looks toward the elevators and hesitates. At that exact moment, the hat shadow steps in, moving toward him. It's like he timed his approach to Evan's pause. Wolfe's voice was quiet. So the knock fails, Evan returns uncertain, and his hesitation gives the killer his opening, I said. Good, Wolfe replied. Hesitation is measurable, I blinked. You call that good? It is good for us, Wolfe said. It demonstrates that the killer relied on timing, not chance. Now, Mr. Goodwin, I require one more fact. A man who knocks in a friendly pattern and does not receive entry will seek another door. I frowned. You think he tested another apartment? I think he tested another decision point, Wolfe replied. Find it. I looked around the lobby office. How? By asking, Wolfe said, as if the concept were novel. You will inquire among tenants specifically. You will inquire whether any tenant heard the same knock pattern around 9:40, 5 or later. I hung up and went upstairs. I did not want to knock on doors in a building where people fear knocks. But the case required irony. I started on the 6th floor because I wanted distance from Lena's floor, and because the murderer's search for an opening would likely move upward or downward, not remain on the same landing where a closed door had already refused him. On the 6th floor, I found a tenant named Harriet Dole, a woman with sharp eyes and a dog that disliked me instantly. Harriet listened to my introduction with suspicion, then nodded slowly. I heard something. What? I asked. A knock, she said. Semonite. It was about 9:46 maybe. I looked at the clock because it was odd. Describe the knock, I said. She frowned, thinking. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. My cigarette went cold in my fingers. Yes, I said. And then silence, she said. No voice, no announcement. I stayed quiet. My dog growled. After a minute, footsteps went away. Slow, I asked. She nodded. Slow, like whoever it was expected me to open. I wrote it down. Did you look through the peephole? She snorted. At night, number. I'm not stupid. I almost smiled. People in New York are proud of their caution, as if fear were a badge of intelligence. So the same knock pattern was used on your door at 9:46, I said. Yes, Harriet replied. I didn't answer. If you're telling me that matters, I don't like it. It matters, I said. But you're not the one who killed anyone. Her eyes narrowed. Then who did? That's what we're working on, I said. I went down the hall and asked a few more tenants. One other person on the 6th floor admitted hearing a knock around that time, but could not describe the pattern. Another said he heard footsteps, but he always hears footsteps. Footsteps are New York's background music. Harriet's detail was enough. The killer had adapted in real time. Lena's door did not open, so he sought another door that might. He knocked with the same friendly pattern, seeking a clean exit, a clean handoff, a door that would turn a stairwell problem into a hallway solution. He did not get it, and that failure likely sharpened his impatience, which meant Evan's hesitation in the lobby became more dangerous. I returned to the brownstone by late afternoon, chilled and irritated, and found Wolfe in the office with Fritz's coffee at hand and a plate of something warm waiting at the side. Because Wolfe does not permit a case to interfere with meals unless the case is rude enough to bleed on his carpet. Wolfe looked up. You found another knock. I stared. You were that sure? Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly. A man who invests in hesitation will seek multiple returns report. I sat and gave it to him. Lobby footage shows Evan reappears from the stairwell at 9:44. pauses just inside the lobby, hesitates, and at that exact moment the hat shadow steps in, timing his movement to Evan's pause. Also, a tenant on the 6th floor reports the same knock pattern at 9:46. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, then silence. Footsteps retreat slow. Wolfe nodded, eyes steady. So the killer was adapting. Yes, I said. He was testing doors. Wolfe's voice was calm. Doors are decision points. A murderer can use them like switches. I exhaled smoke and thought about it. A door can become a signal. A closed door can redirect a man. A door can invite violence. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. This confirms our understanding. The killer wanted a clean retrieval. No struggle, no stairwell. He attempted Miss Pierce's door. It remained closed. He attempted another door. It remained closed. He then confronted Mr. Marr directly when Mr. Marr hesitated. I said, and that hesitation was fatal. Wolfe's tone was quiet. Yes, a man who pauses in the presence of a planner often dies. I leaned back. So what do we do with it? Wolfe's gaze sharpened. We identify the planner, a man who knows the friendly knock pattern, knows Miss Pierce's role, knows Mr. Marr's route, and has access to elevator technician mode. We already have one candidate who writes door in his calendar. That man will now be brought to my office. Mason Klein, I said. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, if he expected an encounter at a door, he will explain why, and if he does not, Inspector Kramer will assist him. I smiled thinly. Kramer assists like a bulldozer. Wolfe's eyes remain calm. Occasionally, a bulldozer is useful. He sat back, and for a moment the office was quiet except for the faint city noise beyond the curtains and the subtle domestic sounds of Fritz preparing dinner. It was the kind of quiet that feels civilized until you remember someone died because a door stayed closed. Wolfe spoke again, quietly, as if summarizing not just the case but a rule of human behavior. Miss Pierce hesitated, Wolfe said. Mr. Marr hesitated. Our killer counted on hesitation. Now he will discover that Nero Wolfe does not hesitate. I nodded, because that was true. Wolfe may sit still, but he does not hesitate. He measures, chooses, and moves with purpose. In a city where doors are always being tested, Wolfe had decided to become the door that does not yield. Chapter 6. The person who expected the door when Nero Wolfe says he wants to know who knocks a certain way. He does not mean it as a poetic curiosity. He means it the way a butcher means he wants to know which pig is squealing. He intends to locate the source, and he intends to cut cleanly. That morning, I was in the office with a notebook, a cold cigarette, and the kind of mood you get when you have spent 2 days thinking about doors and still do not feel safe opening your own. Outside, January was still enforcing its policy. Inside, the brownstone was warm, orderly, and stubbornly civilized. Fritz had prepared breakfast, as if the city did not contain stairwells. Wolfe had been upstairs with the orchids at dawn as if murder were a minor inconvenience. He came down carrying his satisfaction like a robe. He sat behind his desk, glanced at the papers I had arranged, and said, "You will return to the building. You will learn who uses that knock. I will start a social club for people who tap 3 times, pause, and tap twice," I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "You will do nothing frivolous. A knock pattern is a habit. Habits belong to specific men. Find the man," I said. "Fine. I will find the man who knocks like a friendly ghost." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Do not call him friendly. Call him calculated." He pushed a plate aside with the finality of a man who has eaten enough and intends to feed now on facts. "Also, speak to building staff. Tenants keep secrets by instinct. Staff keep them by employment." That was Wolfe. He understands that the difference between a tenant and an employee is simple. A tenant lies to feel safe. An employee lies to stay paid. I returned to Lena Pierce's building for what felt like the 4th time in 2 days. The lobby smelled of wet wool and impatience. The doorman glanced at me as if I were a delivery he had not ordered. I said, "Where does your staff gather?" He blinked. "Excuse me." "Staff," I repeated. "Maintenance operations, Whoever checks out keys and says things like building issues. His eyes narrowed. Why? Because a man is dead in your stairwell, I said. And because the knock on a tenant's door might have come from someone who thinks he owns the hallway. That got me a sigh and a gesture toward a back corridor. I followed it, found the small staff room, and walked into a world of folding chairs, a dented coffee pot, and men who looked like they had been born to carry heavy things. A young maintenance worker glanced up. You lost. I'm looking, I said. For someone who announces himself with a knock pattern, 3 taps pause, 2 taps. 2 heads lifted at once. That was interesting. One man, older, with a grey moustache and a jacket that looked permanently stained by boilers, snorted. That's Nolan. Another nodded. Yeah, Nolan Reed does that. I kept my voice casual. Who is Nolan Reed? They stared at me as if I had asked who owned the building. Then the older man said, Operations coordinator, he thinks he runs the place. Does he? I asked. When he knocks, he does that little rhythm so people know it's him. I wrote it down. So tenants open for him. The moustache man shrugged. Some do, some don't, but it's his thing. That, I said, is exactly what I needed. The younger man frowned. Why you asking? Because that same knock pattern was used on 2 doors, the night Evan Marr died, I said. One on Lena Pierce's floor at 9:40, one on the 6th floor at 9:46. The moustache man's face tightened. You saying Nolan killed somebody? I'm saying Nolan's knock walked into a murder, I said. I need more than a rhythm. I need where he was. The younger man hesitated. He said he was handling building issues remotely that night. I nodded. People say a lot of things remotely. I thanked them, left the staff room, and found Security Supervisor Latham again, because I wanted to see what Nolan Reed's authority looked like in paperwork. Latham's face had not improved with time. What now? He asked. Key logs, I said. Master key checkout. Latham's eyes narrowed. We already gave what we had to the police. Yes, I said, and now I want it in my own hands. The police store facts. Wolfe uses them. Latham muttered something impolite and led me to his office. The log was electronic, with a backup paper sign-out sheet, because the building did not fully trust its own technology. That made me hopeful. Humans forget to forge paper, sometimes. They found Nolan Reed's name quickly. It was not even subtle. Checked out. Master key set. Time. 8:55 p.m. returned. 10:30 p.m. The times were too neat to be coincidence and too ugly to be innocent. Nolan had the keys during the exact window that included Evan's arrival at 9:32, the hat shadow at 9:39, the knock at 9:40, the second knock at 9:46, and the death window that followed. I stared at the entry and said, You want to explain why your operations coordinator needed a master key set that night? Latham shifted, defensive. He said there were building issues. What issues? I asked. Latham's mouth tightened. A tenant complained about a sticking door on the 4th floor. Someone said the stairwell latch was noisy. I felt the hairs rise on my neck. A noisy stairwell latch, the one that can be quiet if pulled right. A sticking door, a master key. That's convenient, I said. Latham bristled. We respond to complaints. Yes, I said. Sometimes criminals file complaints too. I took a photo of the log entry because the memory of a log is not as useful as an image of it when someone later tries to deny it. I called Kramer from the lobby, he answered, sounding like he was chewing nails. What? He barked. I found who uses the knock pattern, I said. Building staff say it's Nolan Reed's signature. Also, key logs show Nolan checked out a master key, set at 8:55 and returned it at 10:30 the night Evan Marr died. There was a pause. Then Kramer said, He told us he wasn't there. He told you wrong, I said. Kramer made a sound like a chair scraping. Bring me that log. I'll bring it to Wolfe, I said. You can come see it there, where you behave. Kramer snorted. I never behave. Try, I said, and hung up. I went next to Meriton accounts because I needed something else. The knock pattern and the keys connected Nolan to the building, but Wolfe would want a stronger tether to the victim. At Meriton, Cal Mercer met me with tired eyes. You again, he said. You miss me, I replied. I have a question. Did Evan Marr have any contact with a man named Nolan Reed? Mercer frowned. Nolan Reed, I don't think so. Did Evan mention an operations coordinator? I asked. Mercer hesitated. He mentioned a cousin. I leaned in. A cousin? Yes, Mercer said. Evan said one of the approvals on the North Dock adjustment line had initials that didn't match the usual finance chain. He said it looked like a favor. He said, it's always a cousin, or a friend, or a buddy from somewhere. That was not a name, but it was a scent. Fraud is always a family business until it becomes a murder. I left Meriton and returned to the brownstone with the log entry burning in my pocket and the knock pattern now attached to a living man. Wolfe was in the office. As expected, calm as a statue and twice as judgmental. Fritz had set a tray on the side table with coffee and something warm, and Wolfe had ignored it for the moment because he was waiting for my report. When Wolfe waits, the room feels like it is being held in place by his patience. I said, the knock pattern belongs to Nolan Reed. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Explain. Building staff say Nolan announces himself with 3 taps. Pause, 2 taps, I said. They say tenants recognize it and sometimes open because they think he is dealing with building issues. Wolfe's voice was quiet. So he expected Lena to open because he expected routine. Yes, I said. Her fear broke his preferred script. Wolfe nodded once. And his presence. I handed him my photo of the key log. Key logs show Nolan checked out the master key set at 8:55 p.m. and returned it at 10:30 the night Evan died. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. So he lied when he denied being in the building. I said. He claimed he was handling building issues remotely. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Handling, a word that usually means gripping. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it I found Inspector Kramer with his coat collar up and his mood down. He stomped in, saw Wolfe and said, All right, give me what you got. I handed him the photo. Kramer's face tightened as he read the times. 9:40 to 9:46, he's got the keys, Wolfe said. You will speak to Mr. Reed. Kramer snorted. We already did, he denied. Wolfe's tone remained calm. Then you will confront him with this, and with whatever your laboratory has. Kramer's mouth tightened. Funny you mentioned the lab. He pulled out a folder, flipped it open, and tossed a report onto my desk. Fiber transfer. I leaned in and read enough to understand. A fiber recovered from Evan Marr's jacket, consistent with a dark wool coat, matched fibers from Nolan Reed's coat, collected during an earlier interview when Reed had been foolish enough to wear the same coat, Kramer said. Lab says the fiber from Reed's coat was on Marr's jacket. Close contact. Not passing in the same hallway. Close. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. So he was near the victim. Kramer grunted. Near enough. Wolfe leaned back slightly, and his voice was thoughtful. Now connect him to motive, I said. Fraud. Wolfe nodded. Yes, but be precise. Kramer's mouth tightened. We got a fraud angle North Dock Services line. Shows up in payroll adjustments. Evan printed proof of a duplicate payment and a flagged refund line. That proof went missing. The man who knocks like a friendly building problem and carries master keys is a good candidate to intercept it. Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. Also, he had access to after-hours routes, technician mode, service doors, stairs. He knows where documents move when people think no one is watching, Kramer said. You're making him the brains. Wolfe's voice was dry. Brains are rarely optional in planned murder. I said, we still need the missing envelope. Kramer's face hardened. We're working on it. Wolfe's eyes flicked to mine. We will not wait. That afternoon, Wolfe sent me with 2 of Kramer's men to Nolan Reed's office. Not in the building, but in the small operations suite. where he kept his schedules and his sense of importance. The suite was in Ridgeway Tower's lower annex, which meant it had fluorescent lights, grey carpet, and the faint smell of ambition. Nolan Reed was not there when we arrived. He was, according to his receptionist, in meetings. That made me smile, because criminals always have meetings once the police start asking questions. Kramer's men showed the warrant. The receptionist went pale. A man from building administration arrived and tried to argue. The argument lasted about 6 seconds, which is the lifespan of most arguments, when a uniformed man has a warrant and a bad mood. We searched. Most of Nolan's office was tidy in the way control freaks like. Pencils aligned, folders labeled, a printed schedule pinned with colored tabs. The same sort of mind that prints camera update windows will print everything. In a metal trash can under his desk, beneath a layer of harmless paper, we found shredded strips that were too deliberate to be casual. They were not the loose, random tears of a man cleaning up. They were thin, long strips, the kind produced by a shredder. One of Kramer's men lifted them with gloves and said, "Looks like somebody tried to eat paper." I said, "That's fraud. Fraud is always hungry." We carried the strips back to the brownstone in an evidence bag, and once there, I did what any sensible assistant does when presented with shredded paper. I spent an hour on the floor with tape, cursing quietly. Wolfe did not help. Wolfe believes floor work is a moral failing. But I got enough to make the fragments speak. The readable section showed a payroll adjustment page with the North Dock refund line. It also showed approval initials, 2 letters, neat, and a small routing note that referenced an account path tied to a name that matched what Mercer had hinted at. A cousin. The initials did not match Mason Klein's neat finance shorthand. They matched Nolan Reed's operational style, the kind of initials a man uses when he thinks he can approve with a nod and a key. I carried the reconstructed fragment to Wolfe's desk, like a trophy I did not enjoy. Wolfe looked at it without touching it. Then at me. "This is the envelope." "It's what was inside," I said. Partly shredded, partly readable, North Dock refund line, approval initials, and a routing note that ties to Nolan's cousin's account. Evan was carrying proof that money was being diverted and laundered through a family channel. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. So Mr. Reed had reason to intercept. He expected Lena to open, accept, and allow a clean retrieval. When she did not, he confronted Mr. Marr. Kramer stood near the door, face hard. Now we got him. Wolfe's gaze was steady. We have him near the scene, with keys, with fibers, with motive, and with fragments of the missing proof in his office. "That is substantial," Kramer said. "It's enough to arrest." Wolfe shook his head slightly. "It is enough to charge him. I prefer to close the structure so tightly that even a clever lawyer cannot breathe inside it." Kramer snorted. "You always want the bow." Wolfe's voice was calm. "I want the truth presented properly." He leaned back slightly, and his eyes turned inward, which is what he does when he is selecting the final pressure point. "We will now squeeze," Wolfe said. Kramer's brows lifted. "How?" Wolfe looked at me. "By using what he fears most. Doors," I said. "Witnesses," Wolfe replied. "Specifically the public description of his knock. He believes the knock is harmless, a habit, a courtesy. We will turn it into identification." Kramer frowned. "You want Lena to testify?" Wolfe nodded. "We will announce that Miss Pierce will publicly testify about the knock pattern. We will let Mr. Reed believe that his private signature will become public evidence. He will react," Kramer said. "He might threaten her." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "He will not reach her. Not while Inspector Kramer remembers he is a policeman." Kramer grunted, offended. "But it was agreement." Wolfe looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin, you will inform Miss Pierce that she is protected. You will also ensure she understands that her memory of the knock is now central." I nodded. "She will love that." Wolfe's tone was dry. "She will endure it." He lifted his gaze, and for a moment the room seemed very still. Fritz's quiet movement in the hall, the faint hum of the city outside, the sense of warmth and order inside the brownstone, all of it felt like a contrast to the cold stairwell where Evan Marr had lost his chance to deliver a piece of paper that could not travel by email. Wolfe spoke softly. Mr. Reed expected courtesy and routine. He used a friendly knock and a master key, like a man using ordinary tools. He assumed fear would keep doors closed and mouths closed. Now we will reverse that. We will open the mouth. We will make the knock speak, Kramer muttered. And then we slap cuffs on him. Yes, Wolfe said, but we will do it with certainty. I looked down at the taped fragments on Wolfe's desk, the proof that had been shredded and still refused to die. Then I thought about Lena Pierce hearing a knock and staying silent because silence felt safe. Wolfe was right. The murderer expected the door to open because routine is easier to exploit than courage. Her fear ruined his clean plan, and that forced him into a stairwell with a man who hesitated at the wrong second. Now Wolfe was preparing to use the only thing stronger than fear: public exposure, and Nolan Reed, who had been counting on quiet doors, was about to discover what happens when Nero Wolfe decides to make noise. Chapter 7. The door seals the trap. Wolfe's office has seen every kind of human performance, from weeping confession to righteous indignation, and it has treated them all the same way a good stage treats bad actors. It does not help them. It merely gives them light and silence and enough space to expose themselves. That evening the office was ready. The brownstone was at its most composed, which is when it is most dangerous to visitors. The hall smelled faintly of furniture polish and the day's cooking. Fritz had made dinner as if the city were not full of stairwells, and Wolfe had eaten as if he were not about to dismantle a fraud scheme with a knock rhythm upstairs. The orchids had been given their due because Wolfe believes discipline is the only form of kindness that matters. He had returned from the plant rooms with that quiet satisfaction he gets when living things obey their conditions. I had spent the late afternoon arranging chairs and arranging facts. Chairs are easier. Kramer arrived first, of course, because policemen arrive early when they are anticipating something they pretend not to enjoy. He came in with his coat collar still up, red in the face from January air and from the knowledge that Wolfe was about to do his job for him again. "Where do you want me?" he demanded. "Near the door," I said. "It suits your personality." He glared. "I ain't furniture." "No," I agreed. "Furniture is useful." He took the chair near the door anyway because he likes the door. It gives him the sense he can leave, if he chooses, which is important for a man who hates being cornered in someone else's house. Lena Pierce came next, escorted by a uniformed man who looked as if he had been ordered to be gentle and did not know how. Lena's face was pale, her eyes too wide. She had been living for days with the idea that her fear had been used like a tool, and the idea does not sit well in the stomach. I stood and offered her a chair. "You look like you want to run." "I do," she said quietly. "Stay," I told her. Wolfe prefers his witnesses present when he turns their memories into evidence. She swallowed and sat, hands clasped tight enough to hurt. Mason Klein arrived with the expression of a man who believes he should never be asked to appear anywhere without an invitation engraved on heavy paper. He wore a good coat and a better scowl. His eyes swept the room, found Kramer, found me, and then paused at Lena. He gave her a look that combined annoyance and calculation. "Mason," I said. "On time." He ignored me. "Where is Wolfe?" "Right where you expect him to be," I said. "Behind the desk. He does not wander." Mason's jaw tightened. "This is a waste." "Then you will not mind when it ends quickly," I told him. Nolan Reed arrived last, and he arrived the way a man arrives when he knows he is walking into a trap and believes he can talk his way out. His posture was still controlled, his chin lifted, his eyes narrowed in practiced annoyance. The cuffs were not on him because Kramer wanted Wolfe's conclusion to land cleanly before he enjoyed the physical part. Nolan's gaze flicked to Lena first, then to Mason, then to Kramer. He did not look at me until he had assessed the exits. I smiled at him. "You're in the right place. Nobody answers doors here unless Wolfe tells them to." Nolan's mouth tightened. "You think you're clever." "I am clever," I said. "Wolfe is accurate. That's worse for you." He took the chair I indicated, the red leather one, and sat like a man testing a chair for weakness. Wolfe entered from the hall, large and composed, wearing a dark suit that made him look less like an eccentric and more like a judge who has grown tired of excuses. He sat behind his desk, arranged his hands, and regarded the room with a calm that felt like temperature. "Good evening," he said. No one replied properly. That was fine. Wolfe does not require manners. He requires attention. He looked at Lena first, and his tone was almost patient. "Miss Pierce, you are here because you heard a knock and did not answer it." Lena's throat moved. "Yes." Wolfe's gaze moved to Mason Klein. "Mr. Klein, you are here because you run finances and pretend you are surprised when money disappears." Mason stiffened. "That's ridiculous." Wolfe's eyes shifted to Nolan Reed. "Mr. Reed, you are here because you prefer doors to open when you knock." Nolan's mouth tightened. "I'm here because an inspector and a fat man think they can bully me." Wolfe's brows lifted slightly. "You have two errors. First, I am not bullying you. I am instructing you. Second, my physique is irrelevant. Your habits are not." Kramer made a low sound of satisfaction. He likes it when Wolfe does the insulting, because then Kramer can pretend he is the civil one. Wolfe leaned back slightly. "We will proceed by sequence. This case began with courtesy denied. It continued with a missing envelope and a dead man in a stairwell. The central fact is simple. A door stayed shut. That door forced the killer into a messier solution. That mess produced evidence." Mason snorted. "This is nonsense. People do not get murdered because someone does not answer a door." Wolfe looked at him as if he had just misunderstood arithmetic. "Do not be simplistic, Mr. Klein. People get murdered because someone wishes to avoid exposure. The closed door was merely the lever." He turned his gaze to Lena. "Miss Pierce, you heard a knock at 9:40 p.m. Describe it." Lena swallowed. 3 taps. A pause. 2 taps. Wolfe nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Goodwin." I stood. We confirmed that the same knock pattern occurred again at 9:46 on the 6th floor. Tenant Harriet Dole reported 3 taps, pause 2 taps, then silence and slow retreating footsteps. Nolan's eyes flicked. Quick. It was not a flinch yet. It was a calculation. Wolfe's voice was calm. 2 doors were tested with the same pattern that indicates habit, not improvisation. "Now, who uses that pattern?" I said. Building staff identified Nolan Reed as using that knock to announce himself. They said tenants recognize it as his. Nolan leaned forward. "That's absurd. Anybody can knock." Wolfe nodded slightly. "Indeed. Anybody can also forge a signature, yet we still identify handwriting habits are signatures." He looked at Nolan. "Mr. Reed, you deny being in Miss Pierce's building that night." Nolan's jaw tightened. I was handling building issues remotely. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. "You were handling something. Remotely is a convenient word. It suggests distance without proving it." He shifted his gaze to me. "The key log." I picked up the photo and handed it across. Wolfe did not touch it. He read it as if the paper might infect him. Then he spoke to Nolan. "Your master key set was checked out at 8:55 and returned at 10:30. Those times contain the knock, the elevator activity, and the victim's death window." Nolan's face stayed controlled, but his eyes sharpened. "Those logs can be wrong." Kramer barked a laugh. "Sure, the building conspired to write your name." Nolan turned toward him. "I oversee keys. My staff could have checked it out under my name." Wolfe's tone was quiet. "You have attempted that argument before. It fails because it requires us to believe that your staff also wore your coat." I said, "Fiber transfer." Wolfe nodded. I lifted the lab report from my desk and held it up. Kramer's lab found a fiber from Nolan's coat on Evan Marr's jacket. Transfer from close contact. Nolan's mouth tightened. Coats brush in elevators, hallways. Wolfe's gaze was cold. "Not like this. Not during a narrow time window in a narrow place. Your argument is not coherent." Kramer leaned forward, enjoying himself now. "You were close to him, Reed, close enough to leave your coat on him." Nolan's eyes flashed. "Even if that were true, It proves nothing about murder. Wolfe nodded. On its own, no. But the case is not built on one fact. It is built on a structure. Let us add the next beam. He glanced at Kramer. Inspector. Kramer grunted and opened his folder. Elevator technician mode. Nolan's head lifted slightly. Kramer continued. Technician mode was activated from 9:37 to 9:46. That allows the elevator to make a stop between floors without logging it the usual way. It hides movement. It's not something tenants use. It's something staff uses. Wolfe's eyes stayed on Nolan. You are staff. Nolan's voice was clipped. Technician mode can be activated by maintenance. Wolfe nodded. Yes, with codes, with access, with keys, all things you handle. Mason Klein shifted in his chair. His face looked tighter now, as if he were noticing for the first time that Nolan was not merely a suspect, but a partner who might sink him. Mason spoke sharply. This is ridiculous. Nolan is operations. He doesn't handle finance. He doesn't handle payroll fraud. You're twisting a building procedure into murder. Wolfe turned his gaze to Mason slowly, and Mason's posture changed, because it is difficult to argue with Wolfe when he is looking directly at you. Wolfe's eyes have weight. Mr. Klein, Wolfe said, you are attempting to isolate Mr. Reed. That is sensible from your position. It is also late. Mason's jaw clenched. My position is that I did not kill anyone. Wolfe nodded. That is a narrower claim. We will address it. He leaned back slightly. This case contains two crimes. One is fraud, the other is murder. They are connected by the missing envelope. You both benefited from the fraud. You both feared the envelope. That fear produced the murder. Mason snapped. Prove I benefited. Wolfe's voice was calm. Very well, Mr. Goodwin. I opened my folder and read. The payroll adjustment printouts Evan Marr produced show a duplicate payment batch, one payment normal, one masked as a refund adjustment to North Dock Services. The approval initials on the routing note align with operations authority, not finance chain. The account path leads to a payee channel, connected to Nolan Reed's cousin. Mason's face tightened. That's not me. Wolfe nodded. Correct. That is Mr. Reed's channel. Nolan's mouth opened. That's a lie. Wolfe's eyes were cold. It is paper, I continued, but Mason Klein's access and corrections permissions were used to keep the line inside, early January adjustments, where it looked like cleanup. Also, Mason's calendar showed a private reminder at 9:15 p.m. That night, one word, door. Mason stiffened. That was nothing. Wolfe's tone was mild. Nothing is rarely scheduled, Mr. Klein. Mason's face reddened. You can write a reminder for anything. Yes, Wolfe agreed. You can. And you chose door. On the very night a payroll clerk carrying proof of fraud arrived at a tenant's building and died near the stairs. That is remarkable timing. Mason's eyes darted to Nolan, then away. It was the look of a man realizing his partner may have decided the partnership was a disposable asset. Nolan leaned forward, voice tight. Mason is trying to drag me into his mess. He's the finance supervisor. He controls corrections. Mason barked. Don't put this on me. You're the one with keys. Wolfe lifted a hand. Enough. Your mutual accusation is informative, but it is not necessary. The structure stands without your cooperation. He looked at Nolan Reed. Mr. Reed, you claim you only wanted to talk. Nolan's jaw tightened. Yes, I wanted to talk to Evan. I wanted to understand why he was snooping. I never meant harm. Wolfe nodded slowly, as if considering. Then he asked quietly, if you only wanted to talk, why did you carry a small metal tool used to jam stairwell latches? The room changed at that sentence. It became quieter. Not because anyone chose quiet, but because quiet arrived like a shadow. Nolan's eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed again. What tool? I reached into my folder and placed an evidence photo on Wolfe's desk. then angled it toward the room. It was not dramatic. It was a small metal wedge tool, the kind that looks harmless until you know what it does. It had been found in Nolan's desk drawer during the search, tucked behind a stack of printed schedules. Kramer spoke, voice hard. "We found it in his office." Nolan's face tightened. "That's a maintenance item." Wolfe's tone was calm. "Yes, maintenance items are often used by men who prefer to control doors." Nolan tried again. "It's for sticking doors, for safety." Wolfe nodded. "For making doors behave. Specifically for making stairwell latches quiet, or for preventing a latch from catching fully. That would allow a stairwell door to open without noise, or to fail to lock as expected. That is not safety for tenants. It is safety for a man who does not want witnesses to hear a door." Nolan's hands clenched on the chair. Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. "You expected Miss Pierce's door to open. You used your friendly knock because it was your signature, your routine, your costume of courtesy. You anticipated that she would open because most people do when they believe the knocker is a staff man with authority. If she opened, you could claim delivery, retrieve the envelope, and leave without confrontation. That was your clean plan." Nolan's voice rose. "I never planned any of that." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Then explain the second knock on the 6th floor at 9:46, using the same pattern. Explain why you tested another door when the first did not open." Nolan's mouth opened, then closed. Wolfe continued, his voice still calm, but now more precise, the way it becomes when he is sealing the last seam. "When Miss Pierce did not open, you adjusted. You sought another door that would open so you could create a clean exit. That door also remained closed. Meanwhile, Mr. Marr emerged from the stairwell and hesitated in the lobby at 9:44. Your lobby shadow stepped in at the moment of his pause. That is when you committed yourself to the messy solution." Mason's voice burst out sharp. "This is insane. You're making a story." Wolfe turned to him. I am making a timeline." He looked back at Nolan. "Now we will address the missing envelope, Mr. Goodwin." I lifted the taped fragments and set them on the desk. They were ugly, patched together like a wound. Enough words were visible to make meaning unavoidable. "The contents of Evan Marr's envelope were found in Nolan Reed's office," I said. "Partly shredded, partly readable. The North Dock refund line is visible. The duplicate payment proof is visible. The routing note shows approval initials tied to a payee channel connected to Nolan's cousin's account." Mason's face drained. "In his office." Nolan's eyes flicked to Mason with something like fury. "You did this to me." Mason snapped. "Me? You're the one who kept the paper." Wolfe watched them, unimpressed. "You both feared those papers." Mr. Klein feared exposure as the finance supervisor who permitted fraudulent corrections. Mr. Reed feared exposure as the man who benefited through a family channel and who controlled the building's after-hours routes. Mr. Marr's envelope would have ended your operation. That is why it was intercepted. Lena, who had been silent, whispered, "Evan was coming to me." Wolfe's gaze softened slightly, only in the sense that it became less sharp. "He believed you could act quickly. You could place the proof into the hands of someone with authority, perhaps even Mr. Klein, before it could be erased electronically. That is why he chose paper. That is why he chose a delivery. That is why email was too risky." Lena's eyes filled, and I didn't open. Wolfe nodded once. "You did not. That denial of courtesy forced the killer out of his preferred script." Nolan snapped. "I didn't kill him." Kramer moved in his chair. "You want to say that again?" Wolfe lifted a hand slightly, and Kramer waited, irritated but obedient. Wolfe's voice was quiet. "Mr. Reed, you have keys, knock pattern, elevator concealment, fiber transfer, possession of shredded proof, and a tool suited for controlling a stairwell latch. You also have motive. You wanted the envelope. You wanted it without noise. You wanted it without witnesses." Nolan's jaw clenched. "I wanted to talk." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "If you wanted to talk, you would not need technician mode. If you wanted to talk, you would not test multiple doors. If you wanted to talk, you would not smash a telephone. If you wanted to talk, you would not keep the papers and shred them. Conversation does not require shredders, Mr. Reed. The room held its breath. Even Mason, who had been trying to wriggle free by blaming Nolan, sat still now because Wolfe had just arranged the facts so that movement felt like guilt. Wolfe reached forward, then, slowly, and tapped his knuckles on the top of his desk. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps. It was not loud, it was not dramatic. It was the sound of a man replicating a habit, and it echoed in the quiet like a fingerprint. Nolan flinched. It was quick, involuntary, the kind of flinch a man cannot defend against because it happens before he remembers he is being watched. His shoulders jerked slightly, his eyes widened, and then he tried to recover with anger. Wolfe's gaze stayed on him. "There," Nolan's voice rose. "That proves nothing. Anybody can tap on a desk." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, but not everybody flinches when it is performed. Your body recognized your signature before your mind could produce a denial." Kramer let out a low grunt that might have been satisfaction. Lena's eyes were fixed on Nolan now, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Mason looked as if he had swallowed something bitter and realized it would not dissolve. Wolfe leaned back. "The door that stayed shut is now closing around you, Mr. Reed. It has closed with key logs, with fibers, with elevator concealment, with shredded proof, and with your own involuntary recognition of your knock." Nolan's hands clenched again. His mouth worked, searching for words that would reopen something that had just been sealed. Wolfe's voice remained calm. "Inspector Kramer will now decide whether to arrest you immediately or to allow you to speak further. Either choice is unpleasant for you." Kramer stood, heavy and certain. "I'm arresting him." Nolan sprang to his feet. "You can't." Kramer's face was hard. "Watch me." As the uniforms moved in, Nolan's eyes darted once toward the door, as if the door might still be a decision point in his favor. Then he looked at Wolfe, and for a moment his expression changed. It was not rage. It was the realization that the door had stopped being a tool and had become a trap. Wolfe did not move. He did not need to. The trap was sealed. The knock nobody answered had become the sound that ended Nolan Reed's freedom. And the office, quiet again after the cuffs clicked, held that quiet, the way it holds all final moments, not with sympathy, but with certainty. Chapter 8. When the door closed, fate opened. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles in a room after a trap has snapped shut. It is not the comfortable quiet of a house at night. It is the quiet of a thing finished, when the moving parts have stopped, and the truth is sitting on the table like a heavy object nobody wants to pick up. In the brownstone, the quiet arrived after Nolan Reed's flinch. Kramer had him on his feet, and the uniforms had stepped in with that practiced economy that says they have done this too many times to take it personally. Nolan's face was tight, his mouth opening and closing as if he could still talk his way into a door that was no longer there. Mason Klein had gone pale in a different way. The pale of a man who has watched his partner fall and realizes the fall pulls him too. Lena Pierce sat rigid, hands clasped until they looked painful, eyes fixed on Nolan as if watching him might reverse what had happened in her stairwell. Her guilt had been a living thing for days. Now it sat in front of her, exposed, with a name and a coat and a knock pattern. Wolfe remained in his chair behind the desk, composed as ever, as if the entire scene were merely an untidy equation that had now been balanced. He disliked commotion, but he did not dislike conclusions. Kramer snapped. "All right, Reed, you're going downtown." Nolan's chin lifted. "You have no case." Kramer's face hardened. "I got a case and a half, key logs, fibers, technician mode, shredded proof in your office. You want to argue to the judge." Nolan's eyes flicked to Wolfe. "This is his story. He's feeding you a story." Wolfe's voice was mild. "Inspector Kramer does not require my stories. He requires evidence. You have supplied it generously." Nolan's hands clenched in the cuffs. His control was fraying, and men like Nolan find fraying intolerable. They would rather confess than endure the sensation of being powerless. Confession, at least, is a form of choosing how you fall. Wolfe watched him for a moment, and then spoke calm and exact. Mr. Reed, you will speak now, or you will speak later. Later will be less useful for you, and less instructive for us. Nolan's mouth tightened. Useful. Yes, Wolfe said. You have been fond of usefulness. You have used doors, keys, and habits. Use your tongue now. Kramer scowled. I don't need him to talk. Wolfe's gaze shifted briefly. You do not need it. I prefer it. Kramer muttered, something that might have been a curse or agreement, and he nodded at the uniforms to hold Nolan in place for a moment longer. Nolan stood there, his shoulders tight, his eyes darting as if searching for the one detail we had missed that would let him slip away. He found none. The room was arranged against him. The timeline was arranged against him. His own knock was arranged against him. He exhaled, and the exhale sounded like surrender disguised as irritation. All right, he said. You want the truth. Wolfe's voice did not change. I already have it. I would like it confirmed. Nolan's jaw tightened. Fine, Mason and I ran it together. Mason jerked in his chair. Number Kramer's head snapped toward him. Shut up. Mason's mouth closed. His eyes were hard with panic now. Nolan's voice went on, clipped. The others, Venn, Pike, Silk, even Kessler, had been pressure and noise around the fraud, but the control lived with Reed and Klein, refund diversions, contractor duplicates. We used North Dock Services as a shell label because it looked like a vendor correction line. First week adjustments. Everyone expects noise. Everyone expects mistakes. We made the mistakes pay us. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. And the money. Nolan swallowed. It moved through a channel tied to my cousin. That part was supposed to be invisible. Mason handled the internal approvals. I handled the movement, building access. After, Hawes routes, the parts of the world that don't leave clean electronic trails. Mason's face drained further, which was impressive. You did it, he whispered. Nolan's head turned sharply. We did it. You signed off. You kept it inside corrections. You told people to stop asking questions. Wolfe's voice was quiet. Mr. Marr asked. Nolan's eyes hardened. Evan found the duplicate. He printed it. He was smart enough to know email was a trap. He said email was too risky. He was right. Lena's breath hitched. He was coming to me. Nolan glanced at her. Then away, as if she were a lever he had tried to use and had failed. He thought you could act fast. He thought you could hand it to Mason or to someone above Mason and blow it up before we erased it. Wolfe nodded once. Paper is stubborn. That is why he chose it. Nolan continued, voice tighter now, as he approached the part that would brand him forever. I saw the risk before Mason did. I watch for risk. It's what I do. I heard Evan was leaving with an envelope. I knew where you lived. Lena, we have addresses. We have building records. We have everything people think is private. So you went there. Nolan nodded once. I went there with the master keys. I planned to intercept it cleanly. No stairwell, no mess. I would ride the elevator, knock like I always knock. Act like a harmless delivery, take the envelope and leave. Wolfe's voice was calm. You expected her to open. Yes, Nolan said, and his mouth twisted. People open when they think it's staff. Courtesy, routine, habit, Lena whispered. I didn't. No, Nolan said. You didn't. That ruined the clean plan. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And so you adjusted. Nolan's face tightened. Evan was in the building already. I saw him come in. I waited near the stairwell door, watching the elevator lights, because I needed to know if my knock worked. The elevator stopped at your floor at 9:40. I knocked. You stayed silent. That silence told me two things. First, you were home. Second, you were not going to help me. Wolfe's tone was quiet. Courtesy denied became information. Nolan's jaw clenched. Yes. He looked down, and when he looked up again, his eyes had the flatness of a man who has stopped trying to appear decent. Evan didn't know what to do when you didn't answer, Nolan said. He hesitated. He came back down. He stepped into the lobby and paused. That pause was my opening. I said, "You moved in when he paused." Nolan nodded. "Yes, I followed him. I got him into the stairwell because it was quiet and blind. I demanded the envelope." Lena's voice was small. "He fought you." Nolan's mouth tightened. He resisted. He grabbed for his phone. Wolfe's voice was calm. "And you struck him." Nolan's eyes flicked. "Aunts, I didn't mean to kill him. I meant to stop him one blow. He fell wrong. He hit the landing." Kramer's face hardened. "You killed him." Nolan's shoulders rose and fell. "I killed him." The words landed in the room and stayed there. Wolfe spoke quietly. "And the telephone?" Nolan nodded, voice low. "I smashed it, not to steal it, to control timing. If he called anyone, if he left a message, if the phone recorded location or time, it would tighten the window. I needed confusion. I needed delay." Wolfe's gaze was steady. "Then you tested another door." Nolan's mouth twisted. "Yes, 6th floor. Same knock. I wanted it to look like someone was wandering. I wanted more noise in the building, more uncertainty. If people reported knocks on different floors, it would sound like a prank or a prowler, not a planned intercept." I said, "But you were still trapped in your own habits." Nolan's eyes flashed, then dulled. "The cameras and the logs betrayed me. The key log, technician mode. I used building systems because I thought they were mine." Wolfe's voice was mild. "You thought the building was your instrument. It became your witness." Mason Klein finally found his voice again, thin and desperate. "I didn't tell him to kill anyone." Kramer snapped. "You didn't tell him to stop either." Wolfe looked at Mason, and his gaze alone made Mason shrink a fraction. "Mr. Klein," Wolfe said, "you participated in the scheme. You benefited from the diversions, whether directly or through continued employment and influence. You feared the envelope because it would have ended your operation and exposed your complicity. That is sufficient." Mason's face contorted. "I didn't know he'd go to her building." Nolan barked, bitter. "You wrote door in your calendar." Mason stiffened. "That was a reminder to check a report." Wolfe's voice was calm. "A report you feared, a door you expected. You may debate semantics in court." Kramer nodded sharply at the uniforms. "Take them both. Reed first, Klein next." The cuffs clicked again, and the sound was final. As Nolan was led toward the hall, he turned his head once, eyes landing on Lena Pierce. For a moment, there was something like contempt, then something like regret, and then nothing. He had built a plan that depended on a door opening. He had been undone by a door staying shut. Mason Klein looked at Lena too, but his look was different. It was accusation, the oldest human reflex. If someone suffers, find a nearby person and blame them. Lena's chin lifted. Small but stubborn, she did not shrink. She had shrunk enough. Kramer's men escorted both men out, and the brownstone's front door closed with a firm, civilized sound that felt like punctuation. The office quiet returned, but it was not the empty quiet of a case unresolved. It was the quiet of a machine that has finished its cycle. Lena remained seated, hands still clasped. Her face looked bruised without a bruise. Guilt does that. Wolfe regarded her for a moment, then spoke with the precision that, in him, passes for comfort. "Miss Pierce," Wolfe said, "you have been carrying an absurd burden." Her voice trembled. "If I opened, Evan would be alive." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Possibly, or possibly the killer would have retrieved the envelope cleanly and continued the scheme. Mr. Marr might have died later, in another stairwell, or another blind corridor, because he had already become dangerous to them. Lena's eyes filled. "But you still delayed," Wolfe said. "Yes, fear delays action. But fear also changes the killer's plan. That change is where truth leaks out." She stared at him. "Truth leaks." Wolfe nodded. "A clean crime leaves fewer traces. Your closed door forced mess. Mess produced logs, fibers, a second knock, and a hurried shredding, it produced evidence. You did not kill Mr. Marr by staying silent. You revealed the mechanism that did. Her shoulders sagged, and she inhaled as if she had been holding her breath for days. I stood and went to the side table, poured her a glass of water without asking, and set it in front of her. She looked at it, then at me. He came to me. Yes, I said, because he thought, you were the fastest path to someone who could act. I wasn't, she whispered. You were the fastest path to the truth, I said. That counts. Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly, which was as close as he comes to approval of my sentimentality. Lena took a sip of water, then set the glass down carefully, as if carefulness were now her religion. Wolfe shifted his gaze to me. Mr. Goodwin, you will ensure Miss Pierce is escorted home. Her building will feel different now. She will require reassurance. I nodded. I'll take her. I have a talent for reassurance that Wolfe lacks. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Do not exaggerate. I almost smiled. I won't. I'll just do it. Lena rose slowly. Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe looked at her. Yes. She hesitated, then said quietly, Thank you. Wolfe did not smile. He did not soften. He merely nodded once, which in Wolfe's language is substantial. When Lena and I reached the hall, Fritz appeared, as if summoned by the sound of someone leaving. He held Lena's coat, helped her into it with gentle competence, and nodded to her with the gravity he reserves for people who have been through something ugly. But as Lena and I stepped into the night, I thought about what Wolfe had said. Fear delays action. Yes, but it also changes the killer's plan. That change is where truth leaks out. And I thought about Evan Marr, who chose paper because paper could not be erased with a keystroke, and who died because he trusted a building to be neutral. Buildings are not neutral. Doors are not neutral. Hesitation is not neutral. Sometimes the smallest human decision, to open or not to open, becomes the hinge that swings a case from hidden fraud into visible murder. That is not fate. That is mechanism. Wolfe would approve of that distinction. And somewhere in the city, a hallway that had once been used as a trap was now just a hallway again, which is as close to justice as New York ever promises.